You are terminated. Effective immediately. The words cut through the room before Ava Bennett could even sit down, and for a second, no one moved, no one breathed, because everyone could see it, the slight curve beneath her blazer, the life she had just told them about 2 days ago. Ava stayed standing, fingers tightening around the edge of the chair, not because she was weak, but because her body needed a second to catch up to what had just happened. Daniel Crawford did not look at her stomach. He did not need to. His voice was already final, already decided. We appreciate your time here, but this decision is not up for discussion. Not up for discussion. Ava let those words settle, slow and heavy, then lifted her eyes, steady, sharper than he expected. Is this because I am pregnant? A pause, just long enough to make the room uncomfortable, just long enough for the truth to exist between them. Daniel's jaw tightened. Be careful what you imply. That was not a denial, and everyone in that room knew it. Ava felt it, the shift, not panic, not yet, something colder, something that started forming quietly behind her ribs. She nodded once, almost politely, like she was the one ending the meeting, but before she could reach for her bag, 2 security guards stepped forward. Too fast, too public. That was the real message. She was not just being let go, she was being removed. Ava did not argue. She did not beg. She simply picked up her purse, adjusted her blazer over her stomach, and walked. But the walk was not quiet. Heads turned, whispers followed, and somewhere to her left, a phone lifted, just slightly, just enough to record. Ava saw it. She registered it. And she chose not to react. Not here. Not like this. Each step down the aisle felt longer than it should, the fluorescent lights too bright, the silence too loud, until the elevator doors finally opened and she stepped inside alone. The doors closed. And that was when her hand moved again, instinctively, protectively, resting against her stomach. Her breath caught, just for a second, then she let it out slowly, controlled, like she was holding something together that no one else could see. Okay. The word was quiet, almost calm, but it did not mean acceptance. It meant something else entirely. Minutes later, she was sitting in her car, engine off, the city moving around her like nothing had changed, like she had not just lost everything at the worst possible moment. Her phone rang. Doctor's office. She stared at the screen, then answered, forcing her voice steady. Hi. The nurse on the other end was gentle, too gentle, reminding her about the upcoming appointment, the tests, the costs. Ava listened, nodding even though no one could see her, until the number was mentioned, and something inside her tightened again. When the call ended, she opened her banking app. The number on the screen did not move. It did not magically change. It just sat there, smaller than it should be, smaller than it needed to be. Ava leaned back in her seat, eyes closing for a brief second, but no tears came. That was the strange part. There was no breakdown, no dramatic collapse, just a growing silence, a space where fear should have been, but instead there was something sharper, more focused, still forming. Hours passed before the email arrived. Subject line, neutral, almost polite, termination details. Ava opened it slowly, reading every word, every line, not skimming, not rushing. Severance amount, minimal. Benefits, ending immediately. Language, carefully written, carefully distant. But then her eyes stopped. Not on the big paragraphs, not on the obvious parts, but on something smaller, something most people would miss. A date. She read it again. And again. The termination approval had been signed 2 days after she informed them about the pregnancy. Ava did not react right away. She did not gasp, did not move. She just stared, her mind replaying the timeline, the conversation, the looks she had ignored at the time. Then, just below it, buried in internal notes that should not have been visible, a phrase appeared, cold and clinical. High-risk employee. Ava's fingers tightened slightly around her phone. High risk. That was how they saw her. Not as a person, not as a future mother, as a problem to remove. She inhaled slowly, then exhaled, longer this time, and something inside her finally locked into place. This was not just unfair. This was not just bad timing. This was intentional. And if it was intentional, then it could be proven. Ava looked at the screen one more time, then quietly took a screenshot, her expression calm, almost unreadable. Now, because somewhere between that room and this moment, something had changed, and she had the feeling, quiet but certain, that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The next morning did not feel like a new day. It felt like everything had already moved on without her. Ava sat at her small kitchen table, the email still open on her phone, the screenshot saved, the words burned into her mind. High-risk employee. She read it again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change, but it did not. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched, because her thoughts would not settle. Something about it felt too clean, too calculated, like this was not a sudden decision, but something that had been building quietly behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed again, a message from a coworker, Melissa, someone who used to sit 2 desks away. I am so sorry about what happened. Ava stared at the message, waiting for more, but nothing came. No offer to help, no question, just distance wrapped in politeness. She typed back, do you know why? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. Silence again. Ava placed the phone down slowly, her jaw tightening, just slightly. That was when it started to feel different, not just like she had been let go, but like she had been erased. She opened her email again and noticed something new, or maybe something she had missed before. Her access had already been revoked, not just to internal systems, but even shared documents she had created. That was fast. Too fast. Most companies took days, sometimes weeks. This had been immediate. Planned. Ava pushed her chair back and stood, pacing slowly across the small apartment, one hand resting lightly on her stomach. You are okay, she whispered, not to herself, but to the child. But her voice carried something else now, something sharper beneath the calm. She reached for her laptop, trying to log into her work account out of instinct, but the system blocked her instantly. No warning, no delay. Gone. Ava leaned back, exhaling slowly, then opened her personal email instead. That was when she saw it. A forwarded message she did not remember sending. Her name was on it, but the tone felt off, overly formal, detached. It referenced a meeting she had supposedly requested, a meeting about performance concerns. Ava frowned, reading it twice, then 3 times. She never wrote this. The timestamp was late, past midnight, a time she clearly remembered being asleep. Her heartbeat picked up, not fast, but steady, deliberate, like her body was catching up to something her mind had just realized. She opened her sent folder. The email was there, sent from her account. Ava felt a chill move through her, slow and precise. This was not just about being fired anymore. This was about something being built around her, something she did not authorize, something she did not even know existed until now. Her phone buzzed again, this time a notification from a company-wide thread she was somehow still receiving updates from. The subject line caught her attention immediately. Workplace Standards Reminder. Ava opened it. It was from Daniel. The message was carefully written, neutral on the surface, but the implication was clear. It referenced maintaining professionalism, respecting company values, and avoiding unapproved disclosures. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. This was not random. This was positioning. He was shaping a narrative before she could even speak, before anyone asked questions, before anyone looked closer. Ava set the phone down slowly, her fingers resting against the table as she processed the pattern forming in front of her. First, the termination, immediate and public. Then, access cut off faster than normal. Now, an email sent from her own account that she never wrote, suggesting performance issues. And finally, a company-wide reminder that quietly framed her as the problem. This was not a single decision. This was coordination. Ava moved back to her chair and sat down, her posture straightening, her breathing evening out again. The fear was still there, somewhere beneath the surface, but it was no longer leading. Something else was. She opened the screenshot again, zooming in on the internal note, high-risk employee. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before she whispered, almost to herself, risk to what? The question lingered in the air, unanswered, but heavier now, because for the first time, Ava was not just reacting. She was seeing the shape of something much larger, something deliberate, and just as her phone lit up again with an unknown number, she had the quiet, unsettling feeling that someone else already knew it too. The phone kept ringing, the unknown number flashing again, steady, patient, like it already knew she would answer eventually. Ava stared at it for a few seconds longer than she should have, then declined the call. Not yet. Not until she understood what was happening. Instead, she grabbed her keys and stood up quickly, faster than her body preferred, her hand instinctively steadying her stomach as she moved toward the door. This was not a plan. It was a reaction, sharp and immediate, the kind that came from something deeper than logic. 20 minutes later, she was standing across the street from the building she had been escorted out of just yesterday. The same glass doors, the same lobby, the same security desk. Nothing had changed. Except now, she was on the outside. Ava took a breath, then stepped forward anyway. Inside, the air felt colder, or maybe that was just her. The security guard looked up immediately, recognition flashing across his face, followed by something else, something more cautious. "Ma'am, you cannot be here." His tone was polite, but firm, rehearsed. Ava did not stop walking. "I just need to speak to Daniel." The guard shifted slightly, blocking her path more directly. "You no longer have access." Ava held his gaze, her voice calm, almost too calm. "I am not here to access anything. I am here to ask a question." For a moment, it looked like he might let her pass. Then his earpiece buzzed softly. He listened, nodded once, and his posture changed completely. "I am going to have to ask you to leave." That was fast. Too fast. Ava's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in anger, but in recognition. Someone upstairs already knew she was here. Someone was watching. "Then tell him I came," she said quietly, turning before he could respond. But as she walked back toward the exit, she felt it again, that subtle shift in the room. The way conversations paused just slightly, the way eyes followed her just a little too closely. Not curiosity, awareness. Outside, the air felt heavier. Ava did not stop walking until she reached her car, her mind replaying the last few minutes in sharp detail. The earpiece, the immediate response, the speed. This was not just a company protecting itself. This was control. Ava sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel for a moment, her breathing uneven now, not from fear, but from something building underneath it. She pulled out her phone and opened her contacts, scrolling until she found Melissa again. This time, she did not hesitate. She called. It rang twice before being picked up. "Hey." Melissa's voice was lower than usual, cautious. Ava did not waste time. "Did they say anything about me after I left?" Silence. Then, "Ava, I do not think you should be calling." That was not concern. That was warning. Ava leaned back slightly, her voice tightening. "Just tell me the truth." Another pause, longer this time. "There was a meeting. After you left." Ava's fingers tightened around the phone. "About what?" Melissa exhaled softly, like she was already regretting saying anything. "They said you had performance issues. That there were complaints." Ava closed her eyes briefly, her jaw setting. "That is not true." "I know," Melissa whispered, then quickly added, "but they made it sound documented." Documented. Ava's mind flashed back to the email she never sent, the meeting she never requested, the narrative being built without her. "Who said it?" Ava asked, her voice quieter now, more controlled. Melissa hesitated, then, "Daniel." "And someone else." "Who?" Ava pressed. But Melissa's voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper now. "I cannot say that. They are higher." Higher. The word landed heavier than anything else. Not just management. Not just leadership. Something above that. Something Melissa was afraid to even name. Ava felt a chill run through her, not from the outside, but from the realization settling in. This was not just Daniel trying to cover himself. This was bigger. Structured. Ava opened her eyes again, staring straight ahead. "Thank you," she said softly, then ended the call before Melissa could respond. The silence in the car felt different now, no longer empty, but charged, like every piece was slowly connecting whether she wanted it to or not. Ava reached for her phone again, opening the screenshot, zooming in on the words high-risk employee. Then she opened the forwarded email she never wrote. Then the termination notice. Piece by piece, the pattern sharpened. She was not just removed. She was replaced in the narrative. Rewritten. And the faster she moved, the faster they responded. Ava leaned back, exhaling slowly. But this time, there was a flicker of something else in her expression. Not fear. Not confusion. Something closer to realization. Because if they were reacting this quickly, this precisely, then they were not just protecting themselves. They were protecting something much bigger. And as her phone vibrated again with the same unknown number, persistent, patient, Ava finally answered, her voice steady. "Who is this?" But the voice on the other end did not introduce itself. It only said one thing, calm and certain. You should not have gone back there. The voice on the other end did not repeat itself. It simply waited, like it already knew. She was listening more carefully now. Ava did not speak right away, her fingers tightening slightly around the phone, her eyes fixed on nothing as her mind tried to place the tone. Calm, controlled, not rushed, not emotional, just certain. Who is this? She asked again, slower this time, more deliberate. A brief pause followed, not hesitation, but choice. Someone who understands what you are dealing with. The voice replied, measured, almost detached. Ava felt a subtle tension rise in her chest, not fear, but awareness. This was not random. Then say it clearly, she said, her voice steady. What am I dealing with? Another pause, slightly longer, then a soft exhale on the other end. A system that does not make mistakes. The words settled in, heavy, precise. Ava's gaze sharpened, her posture straightening in the driver's seat. Everyone makes mistakes, she replied quietly. Not this one, the voice said. And you should not test it again. The line went silent for a second, but Ava did not pull the phone away. You were watching me, she said, not as a question, but as a realization forming in real time. No denial came. No confirmation either. Just silence. And somehow, that was worse. Ava swallowed slowly, her mind racing now, connecting the timing, the security response, the meeting Melissa mentioned, the narrative already built around her. This was not just internal damage control. This was something coordinated, something that moved faster than it should. Why are you calling me? She asked, her voice lower now, more controlled than before. The answer came without delay this time. Because you already stepped into something you do not understand. Ava felt the words land deeper than she expected. Not because they were threatening, but because they felt accurate. She glanced at the building in her rearview mirror, the glass reflecting sunlight, like nothing inside it had changed. But now she knew better. Then help me understand, she said. A soft sound came. From the other end, not quite a laugh, but close enough to feel dismissive. You think this is about understanding? Ava's grip tightened slightly. I think someone is manipulating records, fabricating documentation, and trying to control a narrative, she said, her voice sharper now, her patience thinning. And I think that matters. Another pause. Then, the tone shifted just slightly, not warmer, not kinder, but more direct. It matters, the voice said, but not in the way you think. Ava's brows pulled together, frustration building under her calm. Then explain it to me. Silence again. Longer this time. Ava could hear faint background noise on the other end, distant voices, movement, not chaotic, but structured, like a place where decisions were made without being questioned. Then the voice returned, lower now. You are not the first. Ava's breath caught, just slightly. What does that mean? She asked quickly. But the answer did not come right away. Instead, the voice shifted again, more distant now, as if attention had moved elsewhere for a brief second. When it returned, it was sharper. It means there are patterns you are only beginning to see, the voice said. And patterns like that are not accidents. Ava leaned forward slightly, her heart now beating faster, not out of fear, but out of something closer to urgency. Then why warn me? She asked. Why not just let me figure it out? A quiet exhale came through the line. Because you already made yourself visible. The words hit differently this time. Ava's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again, instinctively scanning, even though she had no reason to. Or maybe she did. By going back, she said slowly. By asking questions, the voice corrected. Ava's chest tightened, not from panic, but from the realization settling deeper now. This was not just about what she had done. It was about what she might do next. So what now? She asked, her voice softer, but not weaker. Just more careful. Another pause. Then, now you decide if you want to keep pushing, the voice said, or if you want to walk away while you still can. Ava felt something shift again, not outside, but inside her, something that refused to accept the second option, even as she understood the weight behind it. And if I do not walk away? She asked. The answer came immediately this time. Then you. We'll find out just how far this goes. The line went quiet again, but Ava did not hang up. Her reflection stared back at her in the rearview mirror, steady, focused, but beneath that, something else was rising, something she could not fully name yet. Who are you? She asked one last time. This time, the response came softer, almost distant. Someone who has seen this before. And then the call ended. Just like that. No warning, no goodbye. Ava lowered the phone slowly, her mind replaying every word, every pause, every shift in tone. This was not help. This was not protection. This was a boundary, and she had already crossed it. She looked back at the building one more time, the glass now reflecting only her own image, small, isolated, standing against something she could not yet measure. For the first time since everything began, Ava felt it clearly, the gap between her and whatever system she had stepped into, not just wide, but deliberate, designed to keep her exactly where she was. And as she sat there, motionless, one thought settled in with quiet certainty. She was already in deeper than she should have been. Ava did not start the engine right away. She just sat there, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the reflection staring back at her. For a moment, everything felt suspended, like the world had paused just long enough for her to decide who she was going to be next. The warning still echoed in her mind. Not loud, not aggressive, but controlled, deliberate. You should walk away. Ava exhaled slowly, her fingers pressing slightly against her stomach, grounding herself in something real, something that had not been taken from her. I cannot, she whispered, barely audible, but the words felt heavier than anything she had said all day. Because deep down, she already knew, walking away would not erase what they had done, it would not fix what they had already started building around her. It would only make it permanent. Ava reached for her phone again, opening the screenshots, the email, the fabricated message, laying them out mentally like pieces of something incomplete. At first, it had felt like chaos, random events happening too fast, but now, the pattern was clearer. Too clear. Every move she made had been anticipated, countered, controlled. That meant one thing. They were not reacting. They were staying ahead. Ava closed her eyes briefly, letting that realization settle, because it changed everything. This was not a mistake she could fix with one conversation. This was not a misunderstanding she could clarify. This was a system. And systems did not respond to emotion. They responded to pressure. Ava opened her eyes again, sharper now, more focused. Then I need to stop reacting, she said quietly, almost like she was giving herself an instruction. Her breathing slowed, her posture straightened, and for the first time since the meeting, her thoughts began to align instead of scatter. She picked up her phone again, not to scroll, not to reread, but to think. Who still had access? Who might have seen something they were not supposed to? Who had nothing to lose? Her mind moved quickly, scanning names, faces, moments that did not seem important before. Then one stood out. Not because it was obvious, but because it had felt strange at the time. A conversation, brief, almost forgettable, but now it lingered differently. Ava opened her contacts and hovered over the name, her thumb pausing for just a second. This was not safe. Nothing about this was safe anymore. But doing nothing was worse. She pressed call. It rang longer this time, each second stretching slightly, until finally, a voice answered, cautious, unfamiliar in tone. Hello. Ava did not introduce herself right away. She let the silence sit for just a moment, then said, You saw something, did not you? There was a pause, sharp, immediate, like she had just stepped into a space she was not supposed to enter. I do not know what you are talking about, the voice replied quickly. Too quickly. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in confirmation. You hesitated, she said calmly. That means you do. Another pause. Longer now. Then a quiet exhale. Ava, you should not be calling me. The same pattern. The same warning. But this time, Ava did not back down. They already decided what I am, she said, her voice steady, unwavering. So I am done protecting what they built. The silence that followed felt different. Heavier. Like something had shifted on the other end of the line. You do not understand who is involved, the voice said, lower now. Ava leaned forward slightly, her grip tightening on the phone. Then help me understand, she replied, her tone no longer asking, but insisting. There was a long pause, one that stretched just enough to make it clear that whatever came next mattered. There are people above Daniel, the voice said finally. People you do not see in meetings. People who do not sign emails. But they decide everything. Ava felt her heartbeat steady, not spike, just steady, like her body was preparing instead of reacting. Then they made a mistake, she said quietly. What mistake? The voice asked, almost immediately. Ava's gaze hardened slightly, her reflection in the mirror no longer uncertain. They assumed I would disappear, she said. Another silence. This time, heavier. Then, that is exactly what you should do. Ava shook her head slowly, even though the other person could not see it. No, she said, her voice calm, but final. That is what they want. The tension on the line shifted again, something unspoken passing between them. Not agreement, not support, but recognition. Ava ended the call without another word, her hand lowering the phone slowly, her mind no longer racing, but focusing. The fear had not disappeared. The imbalance had not changed. She still had no power, no protection, no clear path forward. But something else had changed. She was no longer waiting for permission to act. Ava reached for her bag, pulling out a small notebook, flipping it open with deliberate care. Names, dates, details, not scattered, organized, controlled. Because if they were building something against her, then she would start building something back. Not loudly, not recklessly, but carefully. Ava glanced once more at the building in the distance, the glass still reflecting a world that pretended nothing was wrong. Then she looked down at the first name she had written, her pen hovering for just a second before pressing firmly onto the page. I am not done, she said under her breath, the words steady, grounded, and for the first time since everything began, they felt like a decision. Ava did not rush her next move, and that was the first real change. The urgency was still there, the pressure, the imbalance, but she no longer let it dictate her timing. Instead, she watched. She listened. She paid attention to things she would have ignored before. Patterns, reactions, small details that most people missed because they were not looking for them. That night, she sat at her kitchen table again, the same spot, but the energy was different now, sharper, more intentional. Her notebook was open, names listed in a careful order, not random, but connected by what they knew, what they might have seen, and more importantly, how they behaved after she was removed. Ava traced one name lightly with her finger, not because it was the most obvious, but because it was the quietest. People who talked too much were predictable. People who stayed silent, those were the ones who knew how things worked. She picked up her phone and opened a private messaging app, not her usual one, something she rarely used. Not hidden, just less obvious. Then she typed a short message, nothing emotional, nothing accusatory, just a simple line. Quick question about last quarter reports. Did anything change after mid-month? She stared at it for a moment, then hit send. It was not about the question. It was about the reaction. Ava leaned back slightly, her eyes fixed on the screen, waiting. Not anxiously, but attentively. 2 minutes passed. Nothing. 5 minutes. Still nothing. Then, finally, the message was marked as read. No reply. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, not disappointed, just noting it. Silence was still a response. She closed the app and wrote something next to the name in her notebook. One word, cautious. Then she moved on. The next name was different. More talkative. More reactive. Someone who had always needed to be seen. Ava adjusted her approach slightly, crafting the message with a different tone, still casual, but with a subtle edge. Hey, I heard there was a meeting after I left. Did they say anything specific about me? She sent it, then set the phone down this time, not staring, not waiting visibly. Instead, she reached for her water, taking a slow sip, letting the seconds pass naturally. The response came faster. I cannot talk about that. Ava glanced at the screen, then picked up the phone again, typing just one line. You already are. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Ava felt the shift instantly. Not in the message, but in the rhythm. Pressure. Uncertainty. That was the opening. She did not push harder. Not yet. Instead, she sent one more message, softer this time. I am not trying to get you in trouble. I just need to know what they are saying. The dots appeared again, stayed longer this time. Then finally, a reply came through. They are saying you had issues before this. That it was building. Ava read it once, then again, her expression unreadable, but inside, something clicked. That was the narrative. Not sudden, not reactive, pre-built. Ava typed back slowly, deliberately. Did you ever see any of those issues? The response came quicker now, almost reflexive. No. Ava stared at that single word, feeling the weight behind it. Not just an answer. Confirmation. She placed the phone down carefully, then reached for her notebook again, writing next to the second name, reactive. Slipped. Ava leaned back in her chair, her mind moving faster now, not scattered, but structured. This was how it worked. Not force, not confrontation. Information. Pressure applied in small, precise moments. She did not need to break the system. Not yet. She just needed to understand where it bit. Her phone buzzed again. Not a message this time. An email notification. Ava frowned slightly, opening it. It was from a general company address, one she had not expected to receive anything from anymore. The subject line was neutral, almost routine, internal policy update. Ava hesitated for just a second, then opened it. The message itself was standard, vague, about maintaining documentation accuracy and internal reporting standards. But that was not what caught her attention. It was the timing. Sent just minutes after her last message exchange. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, her breathing slowing as her mind connected the sequence. She had asked a question. Someone had answered. And almost immediately, a company-wide reminder about documentation was sent out. Not directly to her, but close enough. Fast enough. Ava leaned forward, her fingers resting lightly on the table as she processed it. This was not coincidence. This was response. Small, controlled, but real. Ava felt a subtle shift inside her. Not fear, not doubt, but recognition. She had tested the system, and the system had moved. She looked down at her notebook again, then added a new line at the bottom, underlined this time. They are watching reactions, not actions. Ava exhaled slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile forming at the corner of her lips. Because for the first time since everything began, she had not just been pushed. She had pushed back, quietly, strategically, and something on the other side had reacted. Ava did not expect the system to notice her this quickly, but by the next morning, something had shifted again. Not loudly, not visibly, but in the way information moved. She felt it before she could prove it. Subtle delays in responses. Slight changes in tone. Messages that used to come easily now arrived carefully worded, measured, like every sentence had been reviewed before it reached her. Ava sat at her kitchen table, her notebook open, her phone resting beside it. And for the first time, she did not start by asking questions. She started by watching the silence. Because silence, she realized, was where the system revealed itself the most. Her email refreshed automatically, and a new message appeared, internal distribution list, something she should not have access to anymore. That alone was enough to make her pause. Ava opened it slowly. It was not addressed to her, but her address was there, included in a thread that seemed too controlled to be accidental. The subject line was vague, operational, but the content was different. It referenced external sensitivity and information containment protocols. Ava read the line twice, her eyes narrowing slightly. This was not standard language. This was not HR. This was something else. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she closed the email without responding, without interacting, because now she understood something important. This was not a mistake. This was bait. Ava leaned back in her chair, her breathing steady, her mind shifting gears again. If they were sending her things she should not see, then they were no longer just reacting. They were testing her. The realization settled in slowly, but firmly. And that meant one thing. She was no longer invisible. Her phone vibrated. Not a message. A call. The same unknown number from before. Ava stared at it for a second, then answered. But this time, she did not speak first. She waited. The voice came through, calm as before, but slightly different, sharper, more focused. You are adapting, it said. Not a question. A statement. Ava's grip on the phone tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. I am paying attention. A brief pause followed. Then, that is what concerns them. Ava's eyes narrowed, her posture straightening. Them. Not him. Not Daniel. Something broader. And you? She asked quietly. Are you concerned? The silence that followed was different this time. Not dismissive. Not distant. Measured. I am observing, the voice replied. Ava let that sit for a moment, her mind processing the shift. Observing meant evaluating. Measuring. Not intervening. Not yet. Ava leaned forward slightly, her tone sharpening just enough to test the boundary. Then observe this, she said. They are building a case that does not exist. Another pause. Then, you are not supposed to see that. Ava almost smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. And yet I do. The tension on the line shifted, subtle but undeniable. Not emotional. Not personal. Just the tension. Focused. Ava could feel it now, not just through the phone, but in everything around her. The timing of messages. The wording. The controlled leaks. She was being watched, not like before, not passively, but actively, with intent. Ava stood up slowly, walking toward the window, her reflection faint against the glass. Why am I still getting internal emails? She asked. No immediate answer. Then, because someone allowed it. Ava's gaze sharpened instantly. Allowed. Not overlooked. Not accidental. Deliberate. Why? She pressed. Another pause, longer this time. Then, to see what you do with them. Ava felt the weight of that settle in her chest, not as fear, but as clarity. This was not about hiding information anymore. This was about controlling behavior, testing reactions, mapping responses. Ava turned slightly, her reflection shifting with her. Then they are not as confident as they pretend to be, she said quietly. The line went silent for just a fraction longer than before. Then, careful, the voice said. Confidence is not the same as control. Ava exhaled slowly, her fingers brushing lightly against her stomach again, grounding herself. And control can be broken, she replied. Another silence. But this one felt different. Not empty. Not neutral. It carried something beneath it. Not approval. Not agreement. But something closer to interest. Ava felt it. The shift, small but real. She was no longer just reacting. She was being evaluated differently now. Not as a problem. Not as a liability. But as something unexpected. You are not behaving the way they predicted, the voice said finally. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, her eyes steady. Maybe they made the wrong prediction. The silence that followed stretched just long enough to matter. Then the call ended. No warning. No conclusion. Ava lowered the phone slowly, her reflection still watching her from the glass. The room felt the same, unchanged, but she knew better now. The system had noticed. Not loudly, not officially, but enough. Enough to watch her differently. Enough to adjust. Ava walked back to the table, her notebook still open, the names still there, but now they meant something more. This was no longer just about proving what happened. It was about navigating something that was already responding to her every move. And as she picked up her pen again, writing one new line beneath everything else, she realized something that made her pause for just a second longer than usual. They are not just watching me, she whispered, her voice calm, but edged with something sharper now. They are trying to understand me. The realization did not come all at once. It unfolded slowly, like something that had been sitting in front of her the entire time, waiting for her to finally see it clearly. Ava sat still, her notebook open, her pen resting between her fingers, but she was not writing anymore. She was thinking, not reacting, not guessing, but connecting. The words from the call echoed quietly in her mind, not as a warning now, but as a clue. You are not the first. At first, it had sounded like a general statement, something meant to push her back, but now, it felt different. Specific. Intentional. Ava reached for her phone again, scrolling through the names she had written down earlier, but this time, she was not looking at who had answered her. She was looking at who had not. 3 names. All from different departments. All with one thing in common. They had been quiet after she was fired. Not supportive. Not dismissive. Just absent. Ava tapped on one of them, hesitating for only a second before opening an old message thread. Months ago. Casual conversations. Normal interactions. Nothing unusual. But then she scrolled further down, past the usual work updates, until something small caught her attention. A message from weeks ago. Short. Almost forgettable. Hey, did they talk to you about the transition yet? Ava frowned slightly, reading it again. Transition. At the time, she had assumed it was about a project shift. She had replied with a simple, not yet. And that had been the end of it. Or so she thought. Ava leaned forward. Slightly, her eyes narrowing as she pulled up her calendar from that week. Meetings. Reviews. Deadlines. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Then she noticed it. A meeting that had been canceled. Not by her. Not by her manager. Just removed. Ava tapped on it, but the details were gone. No organizer. No notes. Just an empty space where something used to be. Her heartbeat slowed, not sped up, because this was not chaos. This was design. Ava exhaled slowly, her fingers pressing lightly against the table as the pattern sharpened. The message about the transition, the missing meeting, the sudden narrative about performance issues. It did not start the day she was fired. It started before that. Carefully, quietly, Ava sat back in her chair, her gaze drifting for a moment, not unfocused, but deeper, like she was looking past the surface of everything she thought she understood. I was already being moved, she whispered, the words forming slowly, but with weight. Not fired. Repositioned. Removed. Prepared. The realization did not hurt the way she expected. It did not break her. It changed her. Because if this had been planned, if this had been structured before she even knew, then her pregnancy had not created the problem. It had simply accelerated it. Ava's jaw tightened slightly, her hand instinctively resting against her stomach again. Not out of fear. Out of protection. Because now she understood something she had not seen before. She was not targeted because she was weak. She was targeted because she was inconvenient. And inconvenience, in a system like this, was something that got erased. Ava stood up slowly, walking toward the window again, her reflection faint against the glass, but her eyes clearer now, sharper than before. I was never the decision, she said quietly. I was the adjustment. The thought settled heavily, but it did not push her down. It lifted something else instead. Something steadier. Something harder to ignore. Ava turned back toward the table, her movements slower now, more deliberate, as if every step carried intention. She picked up her phone again, but this time, she did not open her messages. She opened her email, scrolling back further, deeper into threads she had not questioned before. And that was when she saw it. A chain of approvals. Not for her termination. For restructuring. Names she recognized. Titles higher than Daniel. Signatures she had never noticed before. Ava's eyes locked onto one name in particular. Not because it was the highest, but because it appeared more than once. Not leading. Not visible. But present. Consistent. Ava's breath slowed, her fingers hovering just above the screen as she processed it. This was not one decision. This was alignment. Quiet agreement across levels she had never been part of. Ava closed her eyes briefly, the weight of it settling fully now, not as confusion, but as clarity. She had not just been removed. She had been replaced. But the replacement was not a person. It was a version of the story that no longer needed her in it. Ava opened her eyes again, the softness gone, replaced by something steadier, something that did not rush, did not panic, but did not step back either. She looked down at the name again, the one that kept appearing, the one that did not belong to the visible structure, but was clearly part of it. And for the first time, Ava felt it, not just the scale of what she was dealing with, but the depth. Because if this name was involved, if this level had been part of the decision before anything became visible, then what she had seen so far was only the surface. Ava slowly set the phone down, her mind no longer searching for answers, but recognizing a truth she could not ignore anymore. This was never about one decision. This was about a system that had already moved before she even knew she was part of it. And if that was true, then somewhere beyond what she could see, there were still pieces she had not uncovered yet, pieces that had been placed long before she ever asked her first question. The shift did not feel like a victory. It felt like a crack, small, fragile, but real enough to let something through. Ava stood still for a moment, her eyes locked on the name that kept appearing in the approval chain, her mind replaying the sequence again, slower this time, more deliberate. This was not just about who signed off. It was about how often that name appeared without drawing attention. Not leading, not visible, but always there. Ava picked up her phone again, her fingers moving more carefully now, no wasted motion, no hesitation. If this system depended on patterns, then breaking those patterns, even slightly, could reveal more than direct confrontation ever would. She opened her email again, scrolling back to the internal thread that had included her by mistake. This time, she did not just read it. She looked at the metadata, timestamps, routing paths, forwarding sequences, small details most people ignored. Ava leaned closer, her eyes narrowing as something subtle caught her attention. The thread had been routed through an internal alias, not a direct sender. A shared node. And that node had a naming pattern. Ava's breath slowed, her fingers hovering over the screen as she searched for that same alias across other emails. It appeared again, and again, not in major decisions, In transitions, adjustments, quiet shifts, Ava felt it, that quiet recognition, like finding the edge of something hidden just beneath the surface. This was not the decision maker. This was the connector, the place where decisions moved without being seen. Ava sat back slightly, her mind aligning faster now. If she could trace this node, even partially, she could see how information flowed before it became visible. Not the entire system, but enough. Enough to step ahead, even if only for a moment. Ava opened a blank message, her fingers pausing for just a second before she typed. Not a question, not a request, a test. Confirming update alignment for mid-month restructuring. Please verify no inconsistencies in prior documentation. She stared at the sentence, simple, neutral, almost routine. Nothing aggressive, nothing suspicious, just close enough to internal language to blend in. Ava did not send it to a person. She sent it to the alias. Then she waited. Not anxiously, not passively, intentionally. Her heart did not race. It slowed. Because this was different. This was not reaction. This was positioning. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Ava did not look away from the screen, but her expression remained steady, controlled. And then, finally, a response came through. Not from a name. From the same alias. No inconsistencies detected. Records remained consistent with approved narrative. Ava read the line once, then again, her breath catching just slightly, not from shock, but from confirmation. Approved narrative. Not records. Not facts. Narrative. Ava leaned back slowly, her mind processing the weight of that single phrase. This was it. Not proof in the traditional sense, but something more dangerous. A glimpse into how they defined reality inside the system. Not what happened. What was approved to be true. Ava's fingers tightened slightly around the phone, but her face remained calm, unreadable. This was the first real shift. Not because she had exposed anything, but because she had touched something real. Something they responded to without realizing what they were confirming. Ava quickly took a screenshot, then another, storing them carefully, methodically. Not rushed. Not careless. Because this, whatever it was, could disappear just as quickly as it appeared. She closed the email, then reopened it, just to confirm it was still there. It was. For now. Ava stood up slowly, her hand resting briefly against her stomach, grounding herself again. The room felt different. Not safer, not easier, but clearer. Because now she knew something they had not intended to show. This was not just about removing her. It was about controlling the story around her. Ava walked toward the window again, her reflection steady, her eyes sharper than they had been before. Then I do not need to prove what happened, she whispered quietly. I need to show how they rewrite it. The thought settled in, heavy but precise. Ava turned back to the table, her notebook still open, and added a new line beneath everything else. Narrative control is the system. She underlined it once, then closed the notebook gently. For a moment, everything felt still again. Not empty, just waiting. And then her phone vibrated. A new message. Not from the alias. Not from anyone she had contacted. A number she did not recognize. Ava picked it up slowly, her eyes scanning the screen. The message was short, direct. You are asking questions you should not know how to ask. Ava's expression did not change, but something inside her tightened, not with fear, but with awareness. Because this was different. This was not a passive response. This was attention. Focused. Intentional. Ava stared at the message for a few seconds longer than necessary, her mind already adjusting, recalculating, because the moment she had just gained, the small advantage she had carved out, had already been noticed. And that meant one thing. She was no longer just inside the system. She was now visible within it. The message stayed on her screen longer than it should have, not because Ava did not understand it, but because she understood it too well. You are asking questions you should not know how to ask. It was not a threat. That was what made it worse. It was a statement of awareness. Ava's fingers hovered over the phone, her instinct telling her to respond, to push, to test the boundary again. But something deeper held her back. Not fear. Calculation. She lowered the phone slowly, her breathing controlled, her mind already moving ahead, trying to anticipate the next shift. Because now, it was no longer about what she could uncover. It was about how fast they could close it. The email, the alias, the response. Ava reached for her phone again, opening the thread where she had received the confirmation, her eyes scanning quickly, but the moment it loaded, something felt wrong. The message was gone. Completely. No trace. No archive. No record. Ava's breath caught, just slightly, her thumb tapping the screen again as if it might reappear. It did not. She checked her screenshots. Still there. For now. But the source had vanished. Clean. Immediate. Ava leaned forward, her heartbeat rising now, not from panic, but from pressure, the kind that built when something moved faster than she expected. This was the cost. She had touched something real, and the system had corrected it instantly. Ava stood up, pacing once across the room, her hand pressing lightly against her stomach as if to steady both of them. Too fast, she whispered under her breath. They are too fast. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Same unknown number. Ava stared at it, then opened it without hesitation. You should have stopped. The words were simple. Final. Ava's jaw tightened, her voice low as she spoke, even though she knew they could not hear her. You already knew I would not. Her reflection in the window looked back at her, sharper now, but there was something else there too. Strain. Ava inhaled slowly, forcing her thoughts back into alignment, but the pressure did not ease. It built. Because now, she could feel it clearly. This was no longer observation. This was response. Direct. Targeted. Ava's phone buzzed again, this time a call. Not the unknown number. A name she recognized. Melissa. Ava hesitated for just a second, then answered. Ava. Melissa's voice came through quickly. Too quickly, already tense. What did you do? Ava froze, her grip tightening slightly. What do you mean? There is another meeting, Melissa said. Her voice lower now, almost a whisper. Not about you. But it is about something you touched. Ava felt the words land harder than she expected. Not about her, but about what she had done. That was worse. What are they saying? Ava asked, her voice steady, but thinner now, stretched by the pressure building underneath. Melissa hesitated, then, they are tightening access. Everything. Documents. Threads. Internal routing. It is like they are sealing something. Ava closed her eyes briefly, her mind racing, connecting the timing, the message disappearing, the system pulling back in real time. Because of me, she said quietly. Melissa did not answer right away. She did not need to. Ava exhaled slowly, her chest tightening now, not just with realization, but with consequence. This was no longer contained. Her move had shifted something larger. You need to stop, Melissa said, her voice sharper now. Ava, this is not normal. People do not react like this unless... She stopped herself. Ava's eyes opened again, sharper, but the clarity from before was now mixed with something heavier. Unless what? She pressed. Silence. Then, unless you are touching something they cannot afford to let out. Ava swallowed slowly, the weight of that settling deeper than anything else. Not a mistake. Not a policy issue. Something bigger. Something protected. Ava leaned back against the table, her body still, but her mind pushing harder, faster, trying to hold on to the pieces she had before they slipped away completely. I have proof, she said quietly. Screenshots. Melissa's response came immediately this time. Then hide them. Do not send them. Do not mention them. Just stop. Ava looked down at her phone, at the images still saved, the words that had changed everything just minutes ago. If I stop now, she said slowly, then everything they wrote becomes true. Another silence. Heavier this time. Melissa's voice, when it returned, was softer, but more urgent. And if you do not stop, Ava, they will make it worse. The line went quiet. Ava did not respond. She could not. Because for the first time, the cost was no longer abstract. It was immediate. Visible. Expanding. Ava lowered the phone slowly, her hand trembling just slightly now, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything pressing in at once. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. The clarity she had found just minutes ago was still there, but now it came with something else. Pressure. Consequence. Risk that she could not fully measure. Ava looked down at her notebook, at the words she had written, at the structure she had started to build, and for the first time, it did not feel controlled. It felt fragile. Like one more move could break it completely. Her breathing became uneven, her chest tightening as the reality settled in deeper. This was not just about uncovering something. This was about surviving what came after. Ava pressed her hand against her stomach again, her eyes closing tightly for a brief second, as everything inside her pulled in different directions. Fear, anger, resolve, all colliding at once. And for the first time since she made the decision to fight back, Ava felt it clearly. Not doubt, not regret, but the edge of something much closer to breaking. The room did not change, but everything inside Ava did. She did not move for a long time, not because she could not, but because there was nothing left to react to. The noise had stopped. The urgency, the sharp thinking, the constant calculation, all of it faded into something quieter, something heavier. She sat at the edge of the table, her phone still in her hand, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular, as if the space in front of her had become safer than whatever was inside her head. Her breathing slowed, uneven at first, then steadier, but not calm. Just controlled. Too controlled. The kind of control that comes when everything else is slipping. Ava let her hand fall from the phone, placing it gently on the table, almost carefully, like any sudden movement might break something she was barely holding together. The screenshots were still there. The proof. The pattern. The system. But now they felt distant. Not meaningless. Just out of reach. Because for the first time, it was not about what she knew. It was about what it cost to know it. Ava leaned back slowly, her shoulders pressing against the chair, her head tilting slightly as she closed her eyes. Not to rest, just to stop seeing. The words echoed again, softer now, but deeper. They will make it worse. She did not argue with it this time. She did not push back, because now she understood something she had not allowed herself to accept before. This was not a fight she could win by being right. It was a system designed to make her wrong. Ava's fingers moved instinctively, resting against her stomach, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. No emails. No names. No system. Just that. Just something real. Something that had not been rewritten. Her breath caught slightly, and this time, she did not hold it back. A single tear slipped down, quiet, unnoticed, but it changed something. Not weakness. Release. Ava opened her eyes slowly, her gaze softer, but not empty. Just clearer in a different way. Because the truth was no longer just external. It had settled inside her. She had lost more than her job. She had lost control. Control over her narrative. Over her timing. Over what came next. And for a moment, that realization pressed down hard enough to make everything else feel impossible. Ava looked down at the notebook on the table, the names, the notes, the lines she had drawn between things that once felt sharp and precise. Now they looked fragile. Incomplete. Like a map that showed where she had been, but not where she could go. Her fingers hovered over the page, then slowly closed it. Not in defeat. In pause. Because right now, pushing forward felt less like progress and more like risk she could not afford. Ava stood up slowly, her movements heavier now, as if each step carried more weight than before. She walked to the window again, but this time, she did not study her reflection. She looked past it. The city moved the same way it always had, indifferent, steady, untouched by what was happening inside her. And that was the part that hurt the most. Nothing had changed. Except everything had. Ava pressed her hand lightly against the glass, her fingers spreading slightly as if trying to ground herself in something solid, something outside of the system she had stepped into. But even here, even now, the awareness did not leave. It stayed with her. Quiet. Persistent. Watching. Ava closed her eyes again, her forehead resting gently against the glass, her breath steady but shallow. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel it fully. The exhaustion, the pressure, the loss of control, the reality that every move she made now carried consequences she could not fully predict. And beneath all of that, something else. Something quieter. Not gone. Just waiting. Ava pulled back slowly, her hand dropping to her side, her posture straightening just slightly, not because she felt stronger, but because something inside her refused to stay collapsed. Not completely. She walked back to the table, her movements slower, more deliberate, her eyes no longer scanning for answers, but holding on to something else entirely. She reached for her phone again, not to check messages, not to react, but to turn it over in her hand, to feel the weight of it. Because this, everything in it, was both the problem and the only way forward. Ava inhaled slowly, then exhaled, longer this time, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm that was no longer controlled by fear, but by something steadier. Acceptance. Not of defeat. Of reality. She could not move the way she had before. She could not push blindly. She could not assume anything would hold. But she was still here. And that mattered. Ava picked up her notebook again, her fingers resting on the cover for a moment before opening it. Not to the first page, not to the beginning, but to a blank one. Her pen hovered, then touched the paper lightly, not writing yet, just marking the space. A new start. Not loud, not immediate, but intentional. Ava's eyes steadied, her breath even, her mind no longer racing, but aligning in a quieter, deeper way. Because she had not lost everything. Not yet. And as she finally began to write again, slowly, carefully, one line at a time, there was no urgency in her movement, only clarity. She was not done. She was just no longer playing the same way. Ava did not rush the next line she wrote. She let the pen rest against the paper, feeling the weight of the moment settle into something quieter, something sharper than before. The chaos was gone. Not because the situation had improved, but because she no longer allowed herself to feel it the same way. She looked down at the blank page, then finally wrote, slowly, deliberately, "What do they protect?" The question was different from the ones she had asked before. It was not about what happened to her. It was about why it happened at all. Ava leaned back slightly, her eyes steady, her breathing even, her mind no longer jumping between fear and anger. Those emotions were still there, but they were no longer in control. They had been moved aside, placed somewhere quieter, somewhere she could access if needed, but not where they could interfere. Because now, she understood something fundamental. Emotion was predictable, and predictable was easy to control. Ava picked up her phone again, but this time, she did not open her messages immediately. She looked at the screen as if it were no longer just a device, but a map. Every notification, every delay, every silence. They were not random. They were signals. Ava unlocked the phone and began moving through her apps with slow precision, not reacting, not searching blindly, but observing. Patterns. Timing. Who responded quickly? Who hesitated? Who disappeared entirely? She was not looking for answers anymore. She was studying behavior. Ava opened her email again, but instead of reading the content, she focused on structure. Headers. Routing paths. Who was copied? Who was left out? The absence of names now mattered more than their presence. She noticed something subtle, something she had missed before. Certain messages, especially those tied to internal shifts, always followed the same distribution pattern. Not broad, not random, controlled, layered. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, her fingers pausing over the screen. That was not communication. That was filtration. Information did not move freely. It was shaped, directed. Ava closed the email and opened her notebook again, adding another line beneath the last. Information is filtered before it becomes visible. She underlined it once, not out of emphasis, but out of certainty. Ava stood up slowly, her movement steady, grounded. The weight from before had not disappeared, but it had changed form. It was no longer something pressing down on her. It was something she carried. And that made all the difference. She walked toward the window again, but this time, she did not pause at her reflection. She looked through it. The city outside moved the same way it always had, but Ava no longer saw it the same way. Everything had layers now. Everything had intention. Ava placed her hand lightly against her stomach again, not out of instinct this time, but out of awareness. She was not just reacting to protect herself anymore. She was thinking about what came next. What would matter? What would last? Ava turned back toward the table, her eyes moving across the room with quiet precision. Nothing had changed. Physically, but everything felt different. Because she had changed. She picked up her phone again, finally opening the message from the unknown number. She did not reply. She did not need to. Not yet. Because now she understood something she had not before. They were not just watching her actions. They were waiting for her to make a mistake. Ava set the phone down carefully, her expression calm, almost unreadable. Then she opened her notebook once more, flipping to the blank page she had started. Her pen moved this time without hesitation. Do not react. Do not reveal. Do not rush. She paused, then added one more line beneath it. Make them move first. Ava leaned back slightly, her eyes steady, her breathing slow and controlled. The fear that had once filled the room was gone. Not because it was no longer justified, but because it no longer served her. In its place was something colder, clearer, more dangerous. Ava closed the notebook gently, her fingers resting on the cover for just a moment before pulling her hand away. The silence in the room was no longer heavy. It was focused, intentional. Ava reached for her phone one last time, turning it face down on the table. Not as avoidance, as control. Because for the first time since everything began, she was not waiting for something to happen to her. She was waiting for the system to reveal itself again. And this time, she would be ready. Ava stood still for a moment, her posture straight, her gaze steady, her presence quieter, but stronger than before. Not reactive, not emotional, not uncertain, just aware. And as she finally stepped away from the table, leaving everything exactly where it was, there was no hesitation in her movement, no trace of the woman who had stood in that conference room days ago, asking if she was being fired because she was pregnant. That version of her was gone, replaced by someone who no longer needed to ask. Someone who had already begun to understand the rules of the game she had been forced into. And more importantly, someone who had decided she would not play it the same way. Ava did not move immediately the next morning. She let the silence sit, let the stillness stretch just long enough to feel intentional, not empty. The difference now was not in what she knew, but in how she chose to act on it. She no longer chased information. She positioned herself where it would come to her. Ava sat at the table, her phone untouched, her notebook closed, her posture steady. Then, slowly, she reached for her laptop instead. Not her personal one. The older device she had barely used, the one that had never been connected to her work accounts directly. Clean, separate, deliberate. Ava powered it on, her expression calm, her movements measured. This was not a reaction. This was a step. She opened a browser, not logging into anything familiar, not accessing anything obvious. Instead, she searched for something broader. Public filings, corporate disclosures, names that had appeared in internal approvals, but now seen from the outside. Ava's eyes moved across the screen carefully, not scanning for speed, but for alignment. Patterns again. Always patterns. And then she saw it. The name that had repeated in internal chains was not listed as part of the executive structure. Not officially, but it appeared in filings tied to a separate entity. A holding group. Quiet. Distant. But connected. Ava leaned closer, her breath steady, her mind locking into place. This was the layer she had not seen before. Not management. Not leadership. Ownership. Or something close enough to it. Ava did not react outwardly, but inside, something sharpened further. Because now she understood something critical. Daniel was not the decision. He was the messenger. The structure she had been pushing against was only the surface of something larger, something that operated without needing visibility. Ava sat back slowly, her fingers resting lightly against the edge of the laptop. If the system filtered information internally, then externally, it had to leave traces. It had to exist somewhere. Ava opened another tab, pulling up archived reports, cross-referencing dates, aligning them with the timeline she had already built. And then, there it was. A restructuring note. Vague. Broad. But timed exactly 2 weeks before her pregnancy announcement. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. This had started even earlier than she thought. Her removal was not the beginning. It was the execution. Ava exhaled slowly, her hand instinctively brushing against her stomach again, grounding herself, not in fear, but in clarity. Then she moved. Not hesitating. Not overthinking. Ava opened her email, but not the one she had been watching. A different one. A clean account. Untouched. Anonymous enough to exist outside the system's immediate reach. She began to type, her words precise, neutral, structured in a way that mirrored internal language without revealing intent. Requesting confirmation on alignment between internal restructuring timelines and external filings, discrepancies noted in pre-approval phase. She paused, reading it once, adjusting a single word, then sent it. Not to a person, to a public-facing compliance contact tied to the holding entity. Ava leaned back, her eyes steady, her breathing controlled. This was the difference. She was no longer asking questions inside the system. She was forcing it to answer from the outside. Minutes passed. Ava did not move. She did not check. She waited. Because now, waiting was part of the strategy. Her phone buzzed, but she ignored it. Not yet. Not until the move played out. Then, finally, a notification appeared on the laptop. A response. Faster than expected. Ava opened it slowly, her expression unchanged, but her focus absolute. The message was brief. Too brief. Your inquiry has been forwarded to internal review for clarification. Ava read it once, then again, her mind already processing the implication. Forwarded. Not dismissed. Not ignored. Escalated. Ava felt it then, subtle but undeniable. The shift. Because this was no longer contained within one layer. The moment her question crossed into that external channel, it forced visibility. Not public. Not yet. But broader. Harder to control. Ava closed the laptop gently, her fingers resting on the cover for a moment longer than necessary. This was the first real movement she had created that the system could not immediately erase. Not internally. Not cleanly. Ava finally reached for her phone, turning it over. Several missed notifications. Messages. Unknown numbers. But one stood out. The same number that had been watching her. Ava opened it. You changed the direction. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, not in hesitation, but in recognition. Because that was exactly what she had done. She had not pushed harder. She had changed the angle. Ava set the phone down slowly, her posture steady, her gaze calm. The pressure was still there. The risk had not decreased. If anything, it had expanded. But for the first time, the system was not just reacting to her. It was adjusting around her. And that meant something fundamental had shifted. Ava stood up slowly, her hand resting briefly against her stomach, her breath. Even, her expression no longer uncertain, no longer reactive. Just focused. Because she had not broken the system. Not yet. But she had forced it to move in a way it did not expect. And that was enough. For now, the message did not come through her phone this time. It came through something else. Ava noticed it the moment she opened her laptop again. A calendar invitation that had not been there before. Clean, minimal, no explanation, just a time, a location, and one line in the description. You wanted visibility. Ava stared at it for a few seconds, her expression unchanged, but her mind already moving. This was not a mistake. This was not an automated response. This was deliberate. A direct line, finally revealed. Ava did not accept immediately. She let the invitation sit, her eyes tracing every detail, every absence. No sender name. No assistant. No department. Just the structure. Controlled. Precise. Ava exhaled slowly, then clicked accept. Not because she was certain. Because she was ready. The location was not the main office. It was a separate building, one she recognized only from a distance. Clean glass. No branding. No obvious signage. The kind of place that existed without needing to explain itself. Ava arrived early, not out of nervousness, but out of intention. She stood outside for a moment, taking in the stillness, the lack of movement, the absence of noise. Even the air felt different here. Quieter. Contained. Ava adjusted her blazer slightly, her hand briefly resting against her stomach, grounding herself before stepping inside. The lobby was minimal. No crowd. No receptionist in sight. Just a single desk, and behind it, a man who did not look up immediately. Ava waited. Not impatient. Observing. When he finally lifted his gaze, there was no surprise in his expression, no question. Just recognition. Ava Bennett, he said calmly, as if confirming something already known. Ava nodded once. You are expected, he added, gesturing toward a hallway without asking her anything else. No sign-in. No verification. Ava felt it immediately. This was not a place where people arrived without being known in advance. She walked down the hallway, her steps steady, her posture controlled, her eyes taking in everything without appearing to search. Doors. Spacing. Silence. No wasted detail. At the end of the corridor, a single room. The door was already slightly open. Ava paused for half a second, then pushed it gently and stepped inside. He was already there. Seated. Still. The same voice she had heard through the phone, but now attached to presence, to space, to something more tangible. Ava did not stop at the door. She walked in fully, closing it softly behind her. The room was simple. One table. 2 chairs. No distractions. Ava took the seat across from him without waiting to be invited. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, not empty, but deliberate. Ava met his gaze directly. Not challenging. Not submissive. Just steady. Measuring. He studied her the same way, his eyes calm, unreadable, but focused in a way that made it clear this was not a casual meeting. This was evaluation. You moved faster than expected, he said finally, his voice low, controlled. Ava did not respond immediately. She let the words sit, then tilted her head slightly, her tone even. You gave me a direction. A faint shift in his expression, not quite a smile, but something close to acknowledgement. Most people do not take it, he said. Ava held his gaze. Most people are not being erased. Silence again. Longer this time. He leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed, but not disengaged. You think this is about you, he said. Ava's fingers rested lightly on the table, her expression unchanged. I think I am part of it. Another pause. Then, that is more accurate. Ava felt the shift in tone, subtle, but important. Not dismissal. Not correction. Adjustment. She leaned forward slightly, just enough to change the distance between them. Then let me ask you directly, she said. What did I interrupt? The question hung in the air, sharp, controlled, impossible to ignore. He did not answer right away. His eyes remained on her, steady, measuring, as if weighing not just the question, but the person asking it. You are assuming interruption, he said finally. Ava did not break eye contact. Then call it what it is. A faint exhale from him, almost inaudible. Then, you changed timing. Ava's gaze sharpened slightly. Timing. Not outcome. Not decision. Just timing. So I was always going to be removed, she said, not as a question, but as a statement. He did not confirm it, but he did not deny it either. Silence answered for him. Ava felt it settle, deeper than before, but this time, it did not shake her. It aligned something. And now, she asked quietly. He leaned forward slightly, mirroring her movement, but not matching her intent. Now, he said, you are no longer predictable. Ava let that sit, her mind registering the shift, the change in how she was being viewed. Not a target. Not just a problem. Something else. And that is a problem for you, she said. Another pause. Then, it is a variable. Ava almost smiled, but did not. Variables can be controlled. His gaze held hers, unflinching. Or removed. The word landed cleanly, without threat, without emotion, just possibility. Ava did not react outwardly, but something inside her tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. This was the line. The point where observation turned into decision. Ava leaned back slowly, her posture still composed, her voice calm. Then you would not be sitting here. A beat of silence. Then another. And for the first time, something shifted in his expression, subtle, but real. Not agreement. Not approval. But interest. Ava felt it immediately. The balance had not tipped. Not yet. But it had moved. Slightly. Enough to matter. Neither of them spoke after that. They did not need to. Because everything that needed to be understood had already been placed between them, unspoken, unresolved, and still very much in motion. The silence did not break suddenly. It shifted, like something unseen had just tilted the balance in a direction neither of them had fully revealed yet. Ava held his gaze, steady, controlled, but inside, her mind was already moving, faster now, sharper, tracking every word, every pause, every omission. Because what he did not say mattered more than what he did. You said I changed the timing, she said quietly, her voice even, but precise. That means something was already in motion before me. He did not answer right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his eyes still on her, but his focus shifting, not away, but deeper, as if recalibrating how much she was ready to understand. Everything is always in motion, he said finally. Ava did not react. Not outwardly. But the answer confirmed something she had already begun to suspect. This was not about one decision. It was about a sequence. Then my pregnancy was not the reason, she continued, her tone steady, her posture unchanged. It was the trigger. A pause. Longer. This time. Not denial. Not correction. Just acknowledgement. Ava felt it settle, not as a shock, but as alignment. Because now, the pieces she had been holding separately began to connect in a way that felt deliberate. The restructuring, the missing meeting, the fabricated narrative. It had all been moving before she ever spoke up, before she ever gave them something visible to act on. You needed a justification, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. Something clean, something that could be explained. His expression did not change, but something in the room shifted, subtle, but undeniable. Ava leaned forward just slightly, her voice lower now, more focused. And I made it easier. Another silence. This one heavier. Because now, she was not asking anymore. She was placing conclusions on the table. He exhaled quietly, his fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table, not tense, not relaxed, just present. You simplified a process that was already underway, he said. Ava felt the words land differently. Not accusation, not defense, just clarification. But that clarification changed everything. Because it meant she had not been singled out in the way she thought. She had been integrated. Ava leaned back slowly, her mind adjusting, recalibrating, letting the new shape of the situation settle into place. So this was never personal, she said, almost to herself. It was structural. He did not respond immediately. Then, it is always structural, he said. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, her gaze drifting for just a second, not away from him, but inward, as the realization deepened. Because if that was true, then Daniel had never been the real antagonist. He had been replaceable. A visible layer. A necessary one. But not the origin. Ava looked back at him, her expression sharper now, more precise. Then why me? She asked. This time, the pause was different. Not measured. Not controlled. Slightly longer than before. And that alone told her more than any direct answer could have. You were in position, he said finally. Ava's eyes narrowed. Position for what? Another pause. Then, to be moved. Ava felt a flicker of something rise inside her. Not anger, not yet, but something closer to resistance. Because the way he said it made it sound simple. Clean. As if her life, her job, her pregnancy, all of it had been variables in something larger, something impersonal. Ava's fingers tightened slightly. Against the table, her voice still calm, but carrying more weight now. You were talking about me like I was already part of the outcome. He met her gaze without hesitation. You were. The word landed heavier than anything else he had said. Not because it was harsh. Because it was final. Ava felt it settle deep, shifting something fundamental in how she saw everything that had happened. She had not just been reacting to a decision. She had been placed inside it long before she knew it existed. Ava exhaled slowly, her hand instinctively brushing against her stomach again, grounding herself in something real, something that had not been calculated by anyone else. Then what was the outcome? She asked quietly. This time, he did not answer right away. His eyes remained on her, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, something that suggested the line between what could be said and what should not be said had just been reached. Ava noticed it immediately. Not the movement, the hesitation. And that hesitation told her more than any explanation could. Because for the first time, there was something he was not willing to place directly in front of her. Ava leaned back slowly, her expression calm, but her mind sharper than ever. So it is not just about removing me, she said. Not a question, a realization. He did not confirm it, but he did not deny it either. And that silence, once again, became the answer. Ava's gaze hardened slightly, not in anger, but in clarity. Because now, the shape of it was changing again. This was not just about her position. Not just about restructuring. There was something else attached to it. Something that required her removal, but did not end with it. Ava stood up slowly, the movement deliberate, controlled, her eyes never leaving his. You said I changed the timing, she said quietly. That means whatever this is, it is still happening. A brief pause. Then, yes. Ava felt the words settle, heavy, but precise. Because it meant one thing. This was not over. Not even close. Ava turned slightly, her hand brushing against the back of the chair, her posture steady, her breathing even. But inside, something had shifted again, deeper this time, more permanent. Because now she understood that what she had uncovered was not the event. It was the edge of something ongoing. Something she had interrupted, but not stopped. And as she reached for the door, her hand pausing just for a fraction of a second before opening it, one final thought settled in, quiet but undeniable. Whatever they had planned, it did not end with her. The door did not fully close behind her before his voice followed, calm, controlled, but different this time, not just observing, but choosing. You are not walking away, he said. Ava paused, her hand still on the handle, her body angled toward the exit, but her mind already turning back. Not because she trusted him, because she understood the shift. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable, her posture steady. No, she replied simply. He did not move from his seat, But something in the room changed again, subtle, but intentional. The space between them was no longer just distance. It was negotiation. Ava walked back toward the table, not rushing, not hesitating, and stopped just short of sitting. She studied him again, more carefully now, not as a voice, not as a presence, but as a position within something larger. Then say it clearly, she said, her tone even, but edged with precision. You did not call me here just to confirm what I already know. A brief silence followed, not empty, but measured. Then, no, he said. Ava held his gaze. So what do you want? She asked. He leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on the table, not tense, not relaxed, just placed. Alignment, he said. The word hung in the air, too simple, too clean. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. That is not a real answer. A faint shift in his expression, not irritation, not dismissal, just acknowledgement. Then a more accurate one, he said. You have already disrupted something. That cannot be undone. Ava did not respond, but she felt the weight of it. Not as pressure, as leverage. And now, she asked quietly. Now, he continued, you either continue to disrupt it, or you learn how to use it. Ava let that sit, her mind moving quickly, dissecting the structure behind the words. This was not an offer of help. This was an invitation to reposition. A controlled one. Ava slowly pulled out the chair and sat down again, her movements deliberate, her presence grounded. And why would you help me do that? She asked. He did not answer immediately. His eyes remained on her, steady, calculating. Because your disruption creates movement, he said finally. And movement reveals things that are otherwise hidden. Ava felt the shift instantly. This was not about her. Not really. She was a variable, a tool, a way to expose something deeper within the system. Ava leaned back slightly, her fingers resting lightly on the table, her voice calm. So you do not need me, she said. You need what I cause. Another pause. Then, that is correct. The honesty was precise, controlled, and more dangerous than anything else he could have said. Ava exhaled slowly, her mind aligning again, adjusting to the new shape of the situation. This was not protection. This was utilization. And that meant she could do the same. Then let me be clear too, she said, her gaze steady, her tone sharpened just enough to shift the balance. I am not interested in helping you expose something I cannot see. He watched her carefully, the silence stretching just long enough to matter. Then you will be shown enough, he replied. Ava almost smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Enough for me to act. Not enough for me to control. He did not deny it. Ava felt it settle, the structure of the relationship forming in real time. Not trust, not partnership, a controlled exchange. Ava leaned forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to shift the tension. Then here is my condition, she said. No more filtered access. If I move with visibility. A pause. Longer this time. He studied her, not as a risk, but as a variable adjusting its own parameters. Then, partial visibility, he said. Ava shook her head once, small, precise. That is not a condition. That is control. Another silence. The room held it, stretched it, sharpened it. Then, finally, limited exposure, he said. Ava held his gaze, measuring the change in language, the slight shift in concession. Not full, but not nothing. She let the silence sit for a moment longer, then nodded once. Then we are not aligned, she said, her voice calm, but final. She began to stand, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to signal that she was willing to walk away from the exchange. Wait, he said. The word came quickly, not loud, but immediate. Ava paused, her movement stopping just short of fully. Rising. She did not sit back down. Not yet. You get access to what you touch, he said. Ava's eyes sharpened. Meaning, if you move something, he continued, you see the response. Directly. Ava held still, processing. This was different. Not full visibility, but real feedback. Immediate. Unfiltered. A way to map the system through reaction instead of access. Ava slowly sat back down, her posture controlled, her expression unreadable. That works, she said quietly. A brief silence followed, but this time, it felt different. Not opposition. Not tension unresolved. Something closer to agreement. But not trust. Never trust. Ava picked up her phone slowly, turning it over in her hand, her eyes never leaving his. Then we are both using each other, she said. Yes, he replied. The simplicity of it made it more real. Ava nodded once, her mind already adjusting, already planning, already calculating the edges of what this new alignment allowed her to do. Because now, she was no longer alone inside the system. But she was not supported either. She was positioned. And that was more dangerous. Ava stood up fully this time, her movement steady, her expression calm. Then I will move carefully, she said. He did not respond. He did not need to, because they both understood what that meant. Ava turned toward the door again, her hand reaching for the handle. But this time, there was no hesitation. Only clarity. And as she stepped out into the quiet hallway, the weight of what she had just agreed to settled in, not as fear, but as awareness. This was not an alliance. It was a balance built on shifting ground. And at any moment, it could collapse. The hallway felt longer on the way out, not because the distance had changed, but because something inside Ava had. Each step was steady, controlled, but her mind was anything but still. His words followed her, not loud, not urgent, just present, threading through her thoughts with quiet precision. You get access to what you touch. It sounded like an advantage. It felt like one. But the more she replayed it, the more she understood what it really meant. Exposure. Not just for the system. For her. Ava pushed the exit door open and stepped outside, the air cooler, sharper, grounding in a way the room had not been. She paused just beyond the threshold, her hand resting briefly against her stomach, her breath steady but deeper now. Because this was the moment where everything shifted again. Not externally. Internally. She had been given something. Not trust. Not protection. But proximity. And proximity came with a cost she could already feel pressing in. Ava walked slowly down the steps, her eyes forward, but her focus turned inward, dissecting every layer of what had just happened. He had not lied. That was the first thing she recognized. He had not softened anything either. Every word had been placed exactly where it needed to be. And that made it more dangerous. Because it left no room for illusion. Ava reached the sidewalk and stopped, her reflection faint in the glass behind her, her posture still composed, but her thoughts colliding now in ways she could not ignore. There had been a moment in that room, small, almost invisible, where something else had existed. Not trust, not connection, but the possibility of it. The way he had watched her. The way he had paused before answering certain questions. The way the silence between them had not felt empty. Ava closed her eyes briefly, her jaw tightening just slightly. That was the risk. Not him. Not the system. But the space where she could begin to believe there was something more than calculation. Ava exhaled slowly, her fingers pressing lightly against her palm, grounding herself again. Because she knew better. She had to know better. This was not a partnership. It was alignment built on mutual use. And the moment she forgot that, the moment she allowed herself to read anything else into it, she would lose control. Ava opened her eyes again, sharper now, the softness gone before it could settle. But the conflict did not disappear. It stayed. Quiet. Persistent. Because part of her understood something else. He could have shut her down. He could have removed her from the equation entirely. But he had not. And that fact lingered, not as comfort, but as a question she could not fully answer. Why? Ava turned slightly, her gaze drifting back toward the building, her reflection now clearer in the glass. She studied it for a moment, not out of vanity, not out of doubt, but out of recognition. The person looking back at her was not the same one who had walked into that first meeting, asking if she was being fired because she was pregnant. That version of her had been reactive, emotional, searching for fairness. This version understood something else entirely. There was no fairness here. Only positioning. Ava's phone vibrated in her hand. A message. The same number. She stared at it for a second before opening it. You accepted. No question. Just observation. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, her thumb hovering over the screen, not to reply, but to consider. Because even this, even the way he communicated, was part of it. Controlled. Measured. Always one step removed from anything that could be called trust. Ava lowered the phone slowly, her mind settling into something quieter, something more defined. The conflict was still there. The pull between what felt human and what was necessary. But now, it was no longer equal. Ava took a slow breath, her posture straightening, her gaze steadying as the decision formed, not suddenly, but with clarity that felt almost inevitable. She could not afford to trust him, not because he had done anything to earn suspicion, but because trust itself was a vulnerability the system was designed to exploit. Ava turned away from the building, her steps steady now, her movement purposeful. The hesitation was gone. The conflict still existed, but it no longer controlled her. It informed her, sharpened her. Ava's hand rested briefly against her stomach again, a quiet reminder of what mattered beyond the system, beyond the game she had been forced into. And that was what made the decision final. Because this was no longer just about her. Ava glanced down at her phone one last time, then turned it face down, her expression calm, her mind aligned. She would not follow instinct. She would not follow emotion. She would follow structure, strategy, control. And as she walked forward, leaving the building behind her without looking back, the last trace of hesitation disappeared completely. Whatever this was becoming, whatever role she now played inside it, one thing was certain. She would not be led by trust. She would be led by precision. Ava did not start with action. She started with silence, the kind that stretched just long enough to let the system settle back into its patterns, just long enough to make her absence feel predictable again. That was the first layer. Disappeared just enough to be overlooked, but not enough to be forgotten. She sat at her table, the notebook open, but now it looked different, no longer a collection of scattered thoughts, but a structure forming in deliberate lines, each one connected, each one serving a purpose beyond itself. Ava traced the page lightly with her finger, not reading, but visualizing. Information, people, timing. 3 layers. All separate, all necessary, all designed to overlap only when she wanted them to. She picked up her pen and drew a small circle around a name. Not Daniel, not the obvious players, but someone quieter, someone who had reacted just slightly too late in previous exchanges. A weak point. Not because they were careless, but because they were positioned in between. Ava wrote beside it, bridge. Then she moved to the next layer. Information. Not the kind that exposed everything, but the kind that forced reaction. That was the key. She did not need to reveal the truth. She needed to create pressure points where the system would reveal itself, trying to contain it. Ava opened her laptop again, her movements slow, controlled, her mind already several steps ahead. She drafted a document, not complete, not accurate, but believable enough to exist. A version of internal restructuring data that almost matched reality, but with one critical deviation. A detail placed carefully, precisely, something that would matter only to those who knew the deeper structure. Ava saved it. Not sending it. Not yet. Because the second layer required people. She picked up her phone and opened a message thread, her tone casual, controlled, just enough familiarity to lower resistance. Quick check. I might have found something off in the mid-month alignment. Can you take a look if I send it? She waited, not watching the screen, listening to the silence again. The reply came faster than before. Sure. Ava nodded slightly to herself. Predictable. She did not send the document immediately. She waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Then she sent it. Not directly. Through a shared link. Traceable. Observable. Because now, it was not about what they saw. It was about who moved first. Ava leaned back, her eyes steady, her breathing even. The third layer. Timing. This was where everything converged. She checked the external compliance thread she had triggered earlier. Still under review. Still active. Good. That meant pressure was building on one side, while she created movement on the other. Ava glanced. At her phone again. A new notification. Not from the person she had sent the document to. From the system. Internal alert. Subtle. Routine. But new. Data inconsistency flagged in shared access point. Ava's lips pressed together slightly. There it was. The reaction. Not public. Not aggressive. But immediate. Ava did not move. She let it unfold. Her phone buzzed again. The person she had contacted. Where did you get this? Ava read the message once, then set the phone down without responding. That was not the question she needed to answer. Because the real answer was already happening elsewhere. Ava opened her laptop again, refreshing the compliance thread. A new update. Escalated. Not resolved. Not dismissed. Escalated. Ava felt the shift, subtle but undeniable. 2 layers now moving at once. Internal containment. External visibility. Ava's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before typing a single line into her notebook. Force overlap. She underlined it once. Because this was the moment where the layers began to converge. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to create tension inside the system itself. Ava stood up slowly, walking toward the window, her reflection steady, her expression calm, but her mind sharper than it had ever been. This was no longer about proving anything. It was about controlling how the system reacted under pressure. Ava's phone buzzed again. The unknown number. She opened it without hesitation. "You are accelerating." Ava did not reply. She did not need to. Because she already knew. That was the point. Acceleration created mistakes. And mistakes revealed structure. Ava looked back at the table, at the notebook, at the carefully placed pieces now moving exactly as she had intended. Not chaotic. Not random. Controlled. But fragile. Because she knew something else. Once all layers aligned, once the pressure reached a certain point, the system would not just react. It would push back. Harder. Faster. More precisely than before. Ava exhaled slowly, her hand resting briefly against her stomach, grounding herself one more time before turning away from the window. Because now, the plan was no longer theoretical. It was active. And somewhere inside the system, people were already responding, already adjusting, already trying to contain something they could not yet fully see. Ava picked up her phone again, her expression steady, her eyes focused. Not on what was happening now, but on what would happen next. Because, once the layers fully overlapped, there would be no pause. No reset. Only consequence. And the clock had already started ticking. At first, nothing looked wrong, and that was what made it dangerous. Ava stood still, her eyes fixed on the laptop screen, tracking the flow she had set in motion, the internal alert, the external escalation, the controlled tension between both layers moving exactly as expected. The system was reacting. The bridge had responded. The pressure points were aligning. It was clean. Too clean. Ava's fingers hovered just above the keyboard, not typing, not interfering, because this phase required distance. Observation. Control through restraint. Then her phone buzzed again. Not once. Twice. 3 times in rapid succession. Ava's eyes shifted immediately, her body still, but her focus tightening. This was not the rhythm she expected. She picked up the phone slowly, her expression calm, but her pulse rising just slightly beneath the surface. The first message was from the contact she had used as a bridge. They just pulled access. Ava's eyes narrowed, her mind adjusting instantly. That was faster than projected, but still within range. Containment. Expected. Then the second message appeared. Same contact. This is bigger than you think. Ava felt a subtle shift inside her, not fear, but alertness sharpening further. That was not part of the pattern. Not yet. She opened the laptop again, refreshing the shared link she had sent. Access restricted. Completely. Ava exhaled slowly, her mind recalibrating, but her posture remained steady. That was fine. That was the system closing one path. It did not break the structure. Not yet. Then the third notification appeared. Not from the bridge. Not from the system. From the compliance thread. Ava clicked it immediately, her focus absolute. The update was short. Too short. Inquiry closed. No further action required. Ava froze. Not outwardly. But inside, something stopped. Completely. Her eyes scanned the message again, slower this time, searching for context, for explanation, for anything that justified the sudden shift. There was none. Closed. Just like that. No escalation. No follow-up. No trace of the pressure she had created. Ava leaned back slightly, her breath slowing, but not from calm. From concentration. Because this was not a reaction. This was a reversal. And it came too fast. Too clean. Ava's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table as her mind moved rapidly through. The sequence. Internal alert. Bridge reaction. External escalation. Then sudden closure. Not containment. Override. Ava's eyes sharpened. Someone had stepped in. Not to react. To reset. And that was not part of the plan. Ava stood up slowly, her movements controlled, but her thoughts accelerating now, pushing beyond the structure she had built. Because this meant one thing. There was a layer above the one she had mapped. A layer that did not respond to pressure. A layer that decided when pressure stopped existing at all. Her phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Ava did not hesitate this time. She opened it immediately. You pushed too early. Ava's jaw tightened slightly, her voice low, almost a whisper to herself. No. Her eyes flicked back to the screen, to the closed thread, to the vanished pressure point. Someone moved above me. The realization settled fast, sharp, undeniable. This was not the system reacting. This was the system correcting. Ava paced once across the room, her hand pressing lightly against her stomach, grounding herself as her mind recalculated everything. The layers, the timing, the assumptions she had made about how far her influence could reach. Ava stopped, her gaze locking onto the notebook still open on the table. Force overlap. The words stared back at her, but now they felt incomplete. Because the overlap had happened. But something had intercepted it before it could fully manifest. Ava picked up the pen again, her movements sharper now, more urgent, but still controlled. She added a new line beneath it. Unknown layer overrides convergence. She underlined it twice. Harder this time. Ava exhaled slowly, her breathing steadying again, but the clarity she had before was shifting into something more complex. Because now, the system was no longer just reacting within her framework. It was operating outside of it. Ava looked back at her phone, at the message still open. You pushed too early. Her lips pressed together slightly. Not in agreement. In recognition. Not of a mistake, but of a miscalculation. Ava turned toward the window again, her reflection steady, but her eyes sharper than before. Because now she understood something she had not accounted for. This was not just a system with layers. It was a system that could erase its own reactions before they became visible. Ava's hand rested lightly against the glass, her fingers still, her mind no longer trying to fix the plan, but to understand where it had broken. And for the first time since she began controlling the flow, Ava saw it clearly. This was no longer her board, and the pieces were no longer moving the way she predicted. Something else had entered the game, something she had not seen, and now, everything was shifting beyond the boundaries she had set. Ava did not move right away, but this time, it was not hesitation. It was recalibration. The difference was subtle, but critical. Her plan had not failed. It had been intercepted. An interception meant exposure, not of her, but of something she had not yet mapped. Ava stood at the window, her reflection steady, her breathing controlled, her mind no longer reacting to the disruption, but absorbing it, restructuring around it. Unknown layer overrides convergence. She repeated the phrase silently, not as a conclusion, but as a starting point. Because now, she was no longer trying to break the system. She was trying to understand what could override it. Ava turned back toward the table, her steps measured, her posture grounded. The urgency was gone again, replaced by something colder, more precise. She sat down, opened her notebook, and did not look at what she had written before. She flipped to a new page. Clean. Intentional. What stops the system, she wrote. Not disrupts. Not delays. Stops. Ava leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing as she replayed the sequence again, but this time from a different angle. Not her actions. Their response. The speed. The silence. The finality of the closure. That was not defensive behavior. That was authority. Ava's fingers tapped lightly against the table, her mind aligning with a new pattern. If the system could erase its own reactions, then the only way to reach beyond it was to trigger something it could not erase. Not internal. External was too broad. It needed to be something that forced visibility at a level higher than the override itself. Ava reached for her laptop again, her movements steady, deliberate. She did not open her previous threads. She did not revisit the trap she had already set. That path was closed. Instead, she searched for something else. Not data. Not reports. People. Names connected to regulatory oversight. Independent audits. Third-party entities that existed outside the company's immediate influence, but still within reach of its structure. Ava's eyes moved quickly now, scanning, filtering, connecting. And then she saw it. A name. Not internal. Not external. Positioned in between. A compliance officer tied to multiple entities, including the holding group she had already identified. Ava leaned forward slightly, her focus sharpening. This was not part of her original map, but it fit perfectly. Because if someone like that received a signal, not from inside, not from a random source, but from a point that aligned with both internal inconsistencies and external filings, it could not be dismissed cleanly. It could not be erased without consequence. Ava exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly on the keyboard as the new structure formed in real time. This was not a trap. This was leverage. Ava opened a new document, her words forming carefully, precisely, not exposing everything, but framing just enough to create a question that demanded attention. Not accusation, not proof, just inconsistency. Enough to trigger review. Enough to force visibility beyond the system's control. She paused before sending it, her eyes steady, her mind running through the outcome paths. If ignored, nothing changed. If acknowledged, everything shifted. Ava pressed send. This time, she did not wait for internal movement. She watched the external channel instead. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. No immediate response. Ava did not move. She did not check her phone. She did not break the stillness. Because this was different. This was not about reaction speed. This was about inevitability. Her phone buzzed. Once. Ava glanced at it briefly. The unknown number. She did not open it. Not yet. Instead, she refreshed the external thread. Nothing. Then again. Still nothing. Ava's expression did not change, but her focus deepened. Because silence at this level meant one of two things. Either it was being ignored, or it was being escalated quietly. Ava leaned back slightly, her fingers resting against the edge of the table, her breathing slow, controlled. Then her laptop pinged. A new notification. Ava's eyes shifted instantly, her body still, but her mind locking onto the moment. She opened it. The message was not long, not detailed, but it was enough. Your submission has been flagged for independent review. Ava did not react outwardly, but inside, something shifted, clean and precise. Because this was not containment. This was escalation outside the system's direct control. Ava finally picked up her phone, opening the message she had ignored. You changed the target. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, not in hesitation, but in recognition. Because that was exactly what she had done. She had stopped pushing the system and started pulling something above it into view. Ava set the phone down slowly, her posture steady, her gaze calm, but sharper than before. Because now, for the first time since everything began, she had something real. Not information, not theory, but leverage that existed beyond the system's ability to erase. And that changed everything. The confirmation did not stay contained for long, and Ava knew it would not. Independent review was not a quiet process, even when it started that way. It moved differently, slower on the surface, but deeper underneath, touching places the internal system could not fully shield. Ava sat still, her hands resting lightly on the table, her eyes fixed on the screen, but her focus already shifting beyond it. Because this was no longer about triggering reactions. This was about controlling what happened next. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, it was not the unknown number. It was the bridge. Ava picked it up without hesitation. What did you do? The message read. Not curious. Not casual. Controlled, but strained. Ava read it once, then set the phone down without responding. She did not need to explain. The reaction itself was the signal. The first ripple. Ava opened her laptop again, but not to check the review. She already knew it was moving. Instead, she opened the internal channel she had lost access to days ago. The same structure. The same patterns. But this time, something was different. Messages were shorter. Less detail. More approvals marked as pending instead of completed. Small changes. But enough. Ava's eyes moved across the screen, absorbing the shift. The system was no longer stable. It was adjusting. That meant pressure had reached inside. Ava leaned back slowly, her breathing steady, her mind aligning with the new reality. This was the moment. Not the beginning of control. The first proof of it. She reached for her notebook and wrote a single line. External pressure forces internal hesitation. She underlined it once. Because hesitation inside a system like this was rare and valuable. Ava's phone buzzed again. This time, the unknown number. She opened it. You escalated beyond containment. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, her gaze steady. You could not stop it, she said quietly to herself. Not as a challenge. As a fact. She placed the phone down and stood up, walking slowly toward the window, her reflection sharp now, defined, no trace of the uncertainty that had once been there. Because now, she was not guessing. She was seeing. Ava's email refreshed automatically. A new message. Internal distribution. not addressed to her, but visible. Another crack. She opened it immediately. Temporary suspension of restructuring approvals pending compliance alignment. Ava's breath slowed, her eyes locking onto the words. Suspension. Not adjustment. Not delay. Suspension. Ava felt it then. Not a shift. A fracture. Because this was not a reaction to her directly. This was the system pulling itself back under pressure it could not control. Ava stepped back from the window, her posture steady, her mind moving quickly through the implications. Every paused approval. Every delayed action. Every decision waiting for clarity that did not exist yet. That was leverage. Not theoretical. Real. Ava picked up her phone again, opening a new message thread. Not the bridge. Not the unknown number. A new contact. Someone positioned higher than the bridge, but still inside the structure. Someone who would feel the hesitation more directly. She typed slowly, deliberately, seeing delays on restructuring approvals. Is there a compliance issue affecting rollout? She sent it. Then she waited. Not for long. The response came faster than expected. We are reviewing some discrepancies. Nothing confirmed. Ava read the message, her expression calm, but her eyes sharper. Nothing confirmed meant uncertainty. And uncertainty at that level created something far more powerful than proof. It created doubt. Ava placed the phone down gently, her fingers resting on the table as she let the realization settle fully. She was no longer pushing against the system. She was inside its hesitation. Ava's laptop pinged again. Another internal update. This time shorter, more urgent. All related data channels under review. Limit access until further notice. Ava almost smiled, but it remained subtle, controlled. Because this was it. The system was no longer filtering information. It was restricting itself. And that was the first real sign of weakness. Ava turned slightly, her gaze moving across the room, but her mind already projecting forward. Every delay would ripple. Every ripple would create more questions. And every question would push the system further into itself. Ava picked up her phone. Again, her thumb hovering for a moment before opening the message from the unknown number. No new text. No response. Just silence. Ava held the phone in her hand for a second longer than necessary, then set it down slowly, her posture straightening, her presence steady, controlled. Because now, the dynamic had changed. Not completely. Not permanently. But enough. Enough for them to feel it. Enough for them to notice. Ava glanced back at her laptop, at the paused approvals, the restricted channels, the controlled language shifting into uncertainty. And for the first time since everything began, she was not the one being managed. She was the one creating movement. Her phone buzzed one last time. The bridge again. This time, only 2 words. What happened? Ava looked at the message, then slowly turned the phone face down, her expression calm, but unshaken. Because the answer was already clear, and they were starting to realize it. They were no longer controlling the situation. They were reacting to her. The message did not come immediately, and that was the first sign something had changed. Ava noticed it before she even picked up her phone, the absence of interruption, the delay where there used to be instant response, the silence stretching just a little too long. She stood by the window, her posture relaxed, her breathing even, but her awareness sharper than ever. Because this kind of silence did not belong to control. It belonged to recalculation. Her phone finally buzzed. Once. Then again. Ava did not rush. She turned slowly, walked back to the table, and only then picked it up. The unknown number. She opened it. No greeting. No framing. Just a single line. You are forcing instability. Ava read it once, her expression unchanged, but something inside her settled deeper. Not satisfaction. Recognition. Because that was no longer an accusation. It was an observation. Ava placed the phone down gently, her fingers resting against the surface of the table, her mind already moving beyond the words. He had always been precise, controlled, detached. Every message before this had carried distance, calculation. But this was different. The language had shifted, subtly, but enough. Ava picked up the phone again, her thumb hovering for a moment before typing. You told me to use movement. She sent it, then waited. This time, the response did not come immediately. Seconds passed. Then, minutes. Ava did not move. She did not check anything else. She let the delay stretch, because now, the delay itself was information. When the message finally appeared, it was longer than before. There are boundaries you do not understand. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, her lips pressing together, not in reaction, but in focus. That was not control. That was warning. Ava typed again, slower this time, more deliberate. Then explain them. She sent it. The reply came faster than the last one, but not instantly. Some processes cannot be exposed without consequences that extend beyond you. Ava read it carefully, her mind parsing the structure, the tone, the implication beneath it. Not dismissal, not deflection, containment, but not complete. Ava leaned back slightly, her gaze steady, her voice quiet as she spoke the thought out loud. You are not stopping me. The realization landed clearly. Because if he could have, he would have. Instead, he was adjusting. Warning. Responding. Ava picked up the phone again, her fingers steady, her tone sharper now. You are adapting. She sent it. The response came almost immediately this time. So are you. Ava felt it then, not in the words, but in the rhythm between them. The balance had shifted. Not completely, but enough that the interaction no longer felt one-sided. Ava stood up slowly, walking back toward the window, her reflection sharp, her posture steady. She held the phone loosely in her hand, her mind no longer chasing answers, but observing something else entirely. Him. His reactions. His adjustments. Because for the first time, he was no longer just watching her. He was reacting to her. Ava's phone buzzed again. She did not look at it immediately. She let it sit for a moment, letting the weight of that realization settle fully before turning the screen toward her. Another message. Longer this time. Unusual. You are creating pressure in places that were never meant to intersect. Ava read it once, then again, her eyes narrowing slightly. The phrasing was precise, but the intent beneath it was not as controlled as before. There was something else there. Something closer to strain. Ava typed slowly, each word placed carefully. Then they should not have been connected. She sent it. The silence that followed stretched longer than any before. Ava did not move. She did not look away. Because now, this was no longer just about information. It was about position. When the response finally came, it was different. Not structured the same way. Not measured the same way. You are assuming this is a system you can dismantle. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, her gaze steady, her mind already ahead of the words. No, she said quietly, then typed it. I am assuming it is a system that can be exposed. She sent it. This time, the response came immediately. No delay, no pause, just a single line. That is not the same thing. Ava held the phone in her hand, her eyes fixed on the message, but her focus deeper than that. Because now, she could feel it clearly. The difference. The shift in tone. The loss of distance. This was no longer just controlled observation. This was engagement. Direct. Immediate. And just slightly reactive. Ava lowered the phone slowly, her expression calm, but her mind sharp with clarity. Because the one thing that had remained constant until now was his control. His detachment. His ability to stay one step removed from everything she did. And that was no longer fully intact. Ava picked up the phone one last time, her thumb hovering, then typing a final message. You are no longer just observing. She sent it. The response came instantly. Too fast. No pause. No calculation. And you are no longer predictable. Ava read the words, her gaze steady, her posture unchanged. But inside, something shifted, not uncertain, not unstable, but precise. Because that was not an observation. That was a reaction. And for the first time since she had stepped into this, he had revealed it. The message did not come through the phone this time, and that alone told Ava everything had shifted again. It arrived through the channel she had forced open, the independent review thread, the one place the system could not fully silence without consequence. She opened it slowly, her fingers steady, her breathing even, but her chest tightening with something she had not allowed herself to feel until now. The file attached was not labeled for her. It was not meant to be seen by her, but it was visible, and that was enough. Ava clicked it. The document loaded in sections, fragmented at first, then clearer as she scrolled. Names, dates, internal alignment notes. Not speculation, not theory, structure. Ava's eyes moved faster now. Scanning, connecting, recognizing patterns she had already felt but could not prove. The restructuring plan had not started weeks ago. It had been drafted months before. Long before her performance review. long before her pregnancy had even been disclosed. Ava's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table as she kept reading. A classification column. Risk variables. Cost optimization markers. And then she saw it. Projected liability. Maternity leave overlap with leadership transition. Ava stopped. Not because she did not understand. Because she understood too clearly. Her breath caught for just a fraction of a second, her mind replaying the moment she had been told she was terminated, the silence in the room, the way no one answered her question. Because they already had. Months before. Ava scrolled further, her movements sharper now, less controlled, driven by something deeper than strategy. A meeting log. Not attended. Not disclosed. Her name listed. Not as a participant. As a variable. Scenario adjustment. Removal prior to announcement reduces exposure. Ava's jaw tightened, her eyes burning, not with confusion, but with something raw, something undeniable. This had never been about performance. Never about timing. Never about a mistake. It had been a calculation. A decision made long before she had any chance to respond. Ava pushed the chair back slightly, standing up without realizing it, the weight of the realization pressing into her chest. Her breath uneven now despite her effort to control it. She had not been fired because she was pregnant. She had been removed because her pregnancy made her inconvenient to a plan already in motion. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, her hand pressing against her stomach, grounding herself as the truth settled, not gently, not gradually, but all at once. The humiliation, the silence, the way they had looked at her. It had all been part of something she was never meant to see. Ava opened her eyes again, sharper now, her reflection in the screen staring back at her, no longer searching, no longer questioning, just knowing. She sat back down slowly, her movements controlled again, but different now, heavier with clarity. She scrolled further, deeper into the document, into the layer she had not yet fully understood. Financial alignment, external partners, the holding group, and then another name appeared. The same compliance officer she had triggered. Connected, not as oversight, as coordination. Ava's breath slowed. Again, but this time, it was not shock. It was precision returning. Because now, the picture was complete. This was not just a company making internal decisions. This was a network optimizing outcomes across multiple layers, where people were not individuals. They were variables. Ava leaned back slightly, her fingers resting against the table, her eyes fixed on the screen as every piece she had uncovered aligned into a single, undeniable structure. The early removal, the fabricated justification, the controlled narrative. The system had not reacted to her. It had pre-positioned her removal as part of a larger outcome. Ava let out a slow breath, her hand still resting lightly against her stomach, her mind no longer searching for meaning, because there was none beyond what was already clear. They had decided her place before she even knew she was in the equation. The anger came next. Not explosive, not uncontrolled, but deep, steady, anchored in something far stronger than emotion alone. Ava's eyes moved back to the line, projected liability. Her lips pressed together, her voice barely audible, but firm. I was never a liability. The words did not break. They settled. Solid. Final. Ava reached for her phone, opening the message thread without hesitation. Her fingers hovered for a moment, then moved. Now I understand. She sent it. The response came slower this time. Not immediate. Not controlled. When it appeared, it was shorter than anything before. You were not meant to see that. Ava read it once, her expression calm, but her eyes unwavering. Because that was the truth. Not a denial. Not an excuse. A confirmation. Ava typed again, her movements precise, her tone no longer questioning, no longer probing. Certain. You made a decision about my life before I had a voice in it. She sent it. The silence that followed stretched longer than any before. Ava did not look away. She did not shift. Because now, there was nothing left to uncover. Only something left to answer. When the message finally came, it was different. No structure. No distance. Just words. It was necessary. Ava stared at the screen, her expression still, but something inside her settled completely, like a final piece locking into place. Necessary. The word echoed, not as justification, but as confirmation of everything she had just seen. Ava lowered the phone slowly, her posture steady, her breathing even again. but her eyes no longer carrying any trace of doubt. Because now, there was no ambiguity left. No misunderstanding. No hidden layer waiting to be revealed. Only truth. Clear. Complete. Unavoidable. Ava looked back at the document one last time, then closed it, not abruptly, not emotionally, but with finality. Because she no longer needed to read it again. She already carried it with her. She stood up slowly, her hand resting against her stomach, her gaze steady, her presence grounded in something far stronger than before. They had removed her, calculated her, defined her as a risk. And in doing so, they had made one mistake they could not erase. They had given her a reason that could not be undone. Ava picked up her phone again, her expression calm, her voice quiet, but unshakable. Then I will make this necessary too. Ava did not rush after that last message, and that was the most dangerous thing about her now. There was no urgency left in her movements, no visible anger, no reaction that could be measured or predicted. Only direction. She stood still for a moment longer, her hand resting lightly against her stomach, her breathing steady, her mind already several steps ahead of what had just been revealed. Because now, this was no longer about uncovering truth. It was about what she would do with it. Ava moved back to the table, her steps quiet, controlled, her presence filling the space differently than before. She opened her laptop again, not to revisit the document, but to begin assembling something else entirely. Not evidence. Not yet. Structure. She created a new folder, unnamed, then began pulling threads into it, not randomly, not emotionally, but with surgical precision. Internal communications, timing discrepancies, access logs, fragments that meant nothing on their own, but together, they formed pressure. Ava's eyes moved quickly, her fingers steady, her mind mapping not just what existed, but where it would matter most. Because this was no longer about proving they were wrong. It was about making it impossible for them to remain right. Her phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Ava glanced at it, but did not open it immediately. Not this time. Instead, she continued working, letting the message sit, letting the weight of her silence become part of the equation. Because now, even her response timing was a variable she controlled. She pulled up the external thread again. The independent review was still active, but now there were new entries. Requests for clarification. Cross-references. Names she had not seen before, now appearing in connection with the same structure she had uncovered. Ava felt the convergence building again, but this time, it was not fragile. It was inevitable. She opened a second window, drafting a message, but not sending it. Not yet. Because timing mattered more now than ever. Every move had to align. Every piece had to land at the exact moment the system was least capable of containing it. Ava's phone buzzed again. Then again. She finally picked it up, her gaze calm, her fingers steady as she opened the thread. You do not understand what you are triggering. Ava read it once, her expression unchanged, then placed the phone down without replying. Because now, she did understand. Completely. And that was exactly why she was not stopping. Ava stood up again, walking slowly across the room, her mind not racing, but tightening, focusing, narrowing into something sharper than anything she had been before. She was no longer reacting to the system. She was shaping the moment it would be forced to reveal itself entirely. Ava paused near the window, her reflection clear, her posture unwavering. She could feel it now. The pressure on every side. Internal hesitation. External scrutiny. And something else. Movement at a level she had not fully touched yet, but could sense beginning to shift. Ava turned back to the table, her eyes locking onto the screen, her fingers moving again, this time finalizing what she had been building. She did not send everything. She did not expose everything. She selected only what would matter most. The intersection point. The place where internal decisions met external accountability. That was where the system could not hide. Ava hovered over the send button for a moment, her breathing slow, her mind completely clear. Because once this was released, there would be no adjustment, no recalibration, no step back, only consequence. Ava pressed send. The action was small, silent, but irreversible. Her phone buzzed instantly this time. She picked it up without hesitation. You just escalated this beyond recovery. Ava read the message, her eyes steady, her expression calm. Then, for the first time, she responded without pause. There was never a recovery. She sent it. The silence that followed was different. Not controlled. Not measured. Heavy. Ava placed the phone down slowly, her posture straightening, her presence grounded in something absolute. Because now, everything was in motion. Not pieces. Not layers. Everything. She could feel it in the shift of the system, in the tension building across every channel, in the subtle change in how information was moving, faster, less controlled, more urgent. Ava closed her laptop gently, not because she was done, but because she no longer needed to watch. The outcome had already begun. She walked toward the door, her steps steady, her expression calm, her hand resting briefly against her stomach before reaching for the handle. Because this was no longer a plan. It was an event, and she was not preparing for it anymore. She was walking into it. Ava opened the door, stepping into the hallway, the air heavier now, charged with something unspoken, something inevitable. Somewhere, decisions were being made. Somewhere, people were reacting. And somewhere, the structure that had once controlled everything was beginning to crack under its own weight. Ava did not look back. She did not hesitate. Because now, there was only one direction left. Forward. And every second that passed brought everything closer to the moment where nothing could be contained again. The countdown had already begun. The room felt smaller this time, not because it had changed, but because nothing inside it was hidden anymore. Ava stepped in without hesitation, her posture steady, her gaze direct, and for the first time, she did not feel like she was entering their space. She was entering the moment she had built. He was already there, standing by the window, his back half turned, but he did not need to face her to acknowledge her presence. "You escalated faster than expected," he said, his voice controlled, but the precision in it carried something sharper now, something closer to tension than observation. Ava closed the door behind her gently, the sound soft, but final. "You underestimated the cost of silence," she replied, her tone even, her pace unhurried as she walked further into the room. He turned then, slowly, his eyes locking onto hers, studying, measuring, but no longer entirely detached. "You are assuming exposure guarantees outcome," he said. Ava stopped at the table, her fingers brushing lightly against the surface, her expression calm, but grounded in something far more certain than before. "No," she said quietly. "I am assuming it removes your control over the outcome." The silence that followed was immediate, dense, stretching between them like a line neither had crossed yet, but both understood. He stepped closer, not aggressive, not dominant, but deliberate. "You think this ends with accountability," he said. Ava met his gaze without hesitation, her voice steady, but edged with clarity. "I think it begins there." A flicker passed through his expression, subtle, but undeniable. Not confusion, not anger, recognition. Ava saw it, held on to it, and did not let it pass unnoticed. Because that was the shift. He was no longer defining the terms. He was responding to them. "You are forcing a system to reveal itself in ways that were never designed to be visible," he continued, his tone tightening, just slightly. Ava tilted her head, her eyes narrowing, but her voice remained calm. "And yet, it is revealing itself." He paused, just for a fraction of a second too long. Ava caught it instantly. Because that pause did not belong to control. It belonged to recalculation. Ava stepped closer, closing the distance just enough to change the dynamic. Her presence no longer something to observe, but something to engage with. "You called me a variable," she said, her voice low, precise. "A liability." He did not respond immediately. His gaze remained on her, steady, but there was something behind it now, something less certain, less contained. Ava continued, her words measured, each one placed deliberately. "You made a decision before I had a voice." The air shifted, not dramatically, but enough. "That decision was not personal," he said. Ava let out a small breath, not a laugh, not disbelief, but something closer to clarity. "That is exactly why it matters," she replied. Her eyes held his, unwavering, her tone sharpening just slightly. "You removed me because I did not fit your timing." He did not deny it. Ava saw that too, not in his words, in his silence. Ava's fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table, her voice steady, but carrying weight now, something deeper, something that had been building since the moment she first asked why. "You made me disposable," she said. He exhaled slowly, his posture shifting just enough to reveal something he had not shown before. Not weakness, but pressure. You were part of a larger outcome, he said. Ava stepped closer again, her presence firm, grounded, unyielding. No, she said quietly. I was the cost of it. The words settled between them, heavy, undeniable, impossible to redirect. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not empty. It was charged, layered with everything that had been said and everything that had not. Ava could feel it now, not just the tension, but the balance shifting, the space between control and reaction narrowing to something fragile. He looked at her differently now, not as a variable, not as a disruption, as something else, something he had not accounted for. You think this gives you leverage, he said finally. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, her gaze steady, her voice calm. It does. A pause. Longer this time. For now, he added. Ava did not look away. She did not step back. For as long as it takes, she replied. The tension tightened, not breaking, not resolving, but deepening, layering into something neither of them could fully control anymore. Because this was no longer about who understood the system better. It was about who could withstand what came next. Ava turned slightly, her eyes still on him, her posture steady, her presence unshaken. You said I was not meant to see this, she said. Now I am the one who decides what is seen. He did not respond immediately. His gaze remained locked on hers, but something in it had changed again, not fully, not completely, but enough to be felt. Ava stepped back slowly, not retreating, but repositioning, her control intact, her clarity absolute. Because this was no longer a confrontation she needed to win in this moment. It was one she had already changed. She reached for the door, her hand resting on the handle, her eyes never leaving his. This is not over, he said, his voice quieter now, but carrying something heavier than before. Ava opened the door slowly, the movement controlled, deliberate. No, she replied. It is not. She stepped out into the hallway, the tension following her, unresolved, unbroken, stretching beyond the room, beyond the moment, into something far larger than either of them had fully revealed yet. The door had barely closed behind her when she stopped. Not outside, not walking away, just beyond the threshold, where the hallway stretched quiet and empty, but the weight of the room still clung to her. Ava stood there for a moment, her hand still on the handle, her breath steady, but something inside her had shifted again. Not forward, not back, deeper. Then she turned, slowly, deliberately, and opened the door again. He had not moved far, still near the window, but no longer positioned the same way, no longer angled in quiet control. He looked up as she stepped back in, and for the first time, there was no question in her presence. Only intent. Ava closed the door behind her, the sound softer this time, but heavier, final in a different way. There is one thing you keep repeating, she said, her voice calm, but carrying something sharper now, something that did not ask for space. It took it. He watched her, silent, waiting. You keep saying this was necessary, she continued, her steps slow, controlled, each one narrowing the distance between them. That this system required it. A pause. Not long. Just enough. Ava stopped in front of him, her gaze steady, her posture grounded, her presence no longer something to measure. It was something to confront. So let me ask you something simple, she said. Necessary for who? The silence hit immediately, not stretched, not gradual, but instant, dense, pressing into the space between them. He did not answer right away. And that was the break. Ava saw it, felt it, the shift that no longer needed confirmation. Because before, he would have answered. Clean, controlled, detached. Now, there was a delay. Ava did not fill it. She let it exist, let it expand, let it do the work for her. This was never about efficiency, she said quietly, her voice lowering, but intensifying, cutting through the space with precision. It was about protecting something above the structure. His jaw tightened, just slightly. Ava caught it instantly. Because that was the reaction. Not denial. Not correction. Recognition. Ava stepped closer, her voice steady, but now carrying weight that could not be redirected. The timing was not about transition, she continued. It was about shielding the decision before it could be questioned. Another pause. He inhaled, slower this time, his posture shifting, not collapsing, but no longer fixed. Ava pressed forward, not physically, but psychologically, her presence now undeniable, inescapable. You did not remove me because I was a liability, she said. You removed me because I made the timeline visible. The words landed harder than anything before. Not louder, but sharper. Final. He looked at her, really looked this time, and something in his expression cracked. Not dramatically, not openly, but enough. Enough for her to see it. Ava did not stop. You needed everything to happen clean, she continued. No interruptions. No questions. No variables that could slow it down. Her voice did not rise. It deepened, became something heavier. And I was the one thing that could not be controlled once it started. Silence again. But now it was different. Not balanced. Not shared. It tilted. Ava held his gaze, unwavering, her breath even, her control absolute. So you removed me before I had the chance to exist inside it, she said. A beat. Before I could make it visible. He exhaled, but it was not controlled the same way anymore. There was weight in it. Strain. Ava felt it. And for the first time, she did not need to search for advantage. It was already there. You are simplifying something you do not fully understand, he said, but the words did not land the way they used to. Not firm. Not final. Ava tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing, her voice quiet, but cutting. No, she said. I am finally seeing it clearly. She took one more step closer, closing the last distance, her presence steady, unshaken. You built a system that depends on people not being seen, she said. And the moment someone is, it breaks. His gaze flickered, just for a fraction of a second. Ava caught it, held it, claimed it, because that was the moment everything changed. Not externally, not structurally, but here, between them. I am not the disruption, she said softly. I am the proof. The words settled, heavy, irreversible. He did not respond immediately. Could not. And that was the final shift. Ava stepped back slowly, not retreating, but reclaiming space, her posture straight, her presence grounded in something absolute. She did not need to push further. She had already broken the structure that held him in place. Ava turned slightly, her hand brushing against her stomach, a quiet, grounding gesture, but now it carried something else. Not vulnerability. Power. She looked at him one last time, her expression calm, her eyes unwavering. He stood there, still, but not the same. Not composed in the same way. Not distant. Something had changed. Something he could not immediately recover from. Ava did not speak again. She did not need to, because everything that mattered had already been said. The room held the silence, thick, unmoving, pressing into every corner, every breath, every thought left unspoken. And for the first time since this began, he had nothing to control it. The silence did not break, it spread. Ava stepped out of the room, but this time, the weight of what she had said did not stay behind. It moved with her, through the hallway, through the glass walls, through every layer of the system that had once operated without question. She did not need to watch it happen. She could feel it. The first signal came quietly. A notification. Then another. Ava glanced at her phone as she walked, her pace steady, her posture unchanged, but her eyes sharper, tracking the shift in real time. Approval delayed. Pending review. Escalation required. The language was changing. Subtle, but unmistakable. The system was no longer moving forward. It was stalling. Ava stopped near the center of the floor, her gaze lifting slightly as she observed the space around her. Conversations were shorter. Voices lower. People who once moved with certainty now paused, checked their screens, hesitated before speaking. The first fracture was not visible in structure. It was visible in behavior. Ava's phone buzzed again. The bridge. She opened it. They are pulling everything back. Ava read it once, her expression calm, but her mind already moving past the words. That was not containment. That was retreat. And retreat meant something had broken at a level they could not immediately repair. Ava continued walking, her steps unhurried, her presence steady, but the environment around her was no longer the same. Eyes followed her now. Not openly, not directly, but enough. Enough to feel the shift. Ava reached the glass corridor, her reflection moving alongside her, sharp, defined, no longer blending into the background. Another notification. Internal update. Leadership alignment meeting moved forward. Ava's lips pressed together slightly. Acceleration. They were no longer managing time. They were reacting to it. Ava paused, her hand resting lightly against the railing, her gaze drifting across the floor below. Clusters of people forming, breaking, reforming, not coordinated, not clean. The system was no longer synchronized. Ava's phone buzzed again. A new contact. Higher level. She opened it. We need clarification on your submission. Ava did not respond immediately. She let the message sit, let the urgency behind it breathe, expand, reveal itself. Because now, they were not asking to dismiss. They were asking to understand. And that meant control had already shifted. Another message followed. Same thread. This affects multiple divisions. Ava exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly against her phone, her mind mapping the spread. Not isolated. Not contained. System-wide. Ava typed a single line. Then it was never just one decision. She sent it. No hesitation. No adjustment. Because now, the truth did not need to be shaped. It only needed to be placed. The response did not come immediately. And that was the confirmation. Ava lowered her phone, her gaze steady, her posture grounded as the realization settled deeper. They were no longer ahead of the situation. They were inside it. Ava turned slightly, her eyes catching movement across the floor. Daniel. His posture tighter than before, his steps faster, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low, but urgent. Ava watched him for a moment, not emotionally, not personally, but analytically, because he was no longer part of the structure. He was reacting to its collapse. He ended the call abruptly, his gaze lifting, scanning, and for a brief moment, it landed on her. Ava did not look away. She did not move. She held his gaze, steady, calm, unshaken. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not recognition. Not apology. Awareness. Daniel looked away first. Ava saw it clearly. Because that was how it happened. Not through confrontation. Through realization. Ava's phone buzzed again. The unknown number. She opened it without hesitation. You are destabilizing more than you realize. Ava read it. Her expression unchanged. Her mind already beyond the warning. Because now, she could see it too. The system was not just adjusting. It was unraveling. Not violently. Not chaotically. But systematically. One hesitation leading to another. One delay exposing another dependency. One question forcing 10 more. Ava typed slowly, her tone precise. No, she paused. Then continued. It was already unstable. She sent it. The silence that followed was longer this time. Not measured. Not controlled. Just absent. Ava slipped her phone into her bag, her posture straightening as she stepped away from the railing. She did not need to watch every reaction. She did not need to track every shift. Because now, the system was doing what it was designed to do under pressure. It was revealing itself. Ava walked toward the exit, her steps steady, her presence calm, but everything around her had changed. Conversation stopped when she passed. Eyes followed. Not openly. Not directly. But with something new. Not dismissal. Not indifference. Caution. Ava reached the doors, her hand resting on the handle for just a moment before pushing them open. The outside air hit differently this time. Not as an escape. As confirmation. Because what had started as a single decision, a single moment of injustice, had now expanded into something far larger, something that could no longer be contained within walls, within roles, within silence. Ava stepped forward, her gaze steady, her mind clear. The system was not broken yet. Not fully, but it was no longer whole. And that meant only one thing. There was one final step left. One final move that would not just expose it, but end it. The world did not feel louder as Ava stepped forward. It felt quieter, like everything unnecessary had fallen away, leaving only what mattered. The air was sharp, clear, almost still, and for the first time since this began, there was no weight pressing against her chest, no hesitation lingering in the back of her mind. Only clarity. She stopped just outside the building, the glass doors reflecting her back with a precision that felt unfamiliar, not because it was distorted, but because it was finally accurate. This was not the same woman who had stood here before, trying to understand why she had been erased. This was someone who now understood exactly how and why it had been done, and more importantly, how it would end. Her phone remained silent in her hand, but she did not need it anymore to know what was happening. Inside, the system was still reacting, still trying to stabilize, still attempting to regain a rhythm it no longer controlled. But the rhythm had changed, and it was not theirs anymore. Ava walked slowly down the steps, her movements unhurried, deliberate, her gaze forward, but her awareness everywhere. Every second now carried weight, not pressure, but consequence. Every decision from this point forward would not just influence the outcome, it would define it. She paused at the bottom step, her hand resting briefly against her stomach, a quiet, grounding gesture, but now it carried something else. Not protection, not vulnerability, purpose, because everything she had done, every move she had made, had led to this moment. Not the exposure, not the confrontation, the decision. Ava took a slow breath, her eyes lifting slightly as if she could see beyond the present moment, beyond the building, beyond the system itself. Because now, she could feel it. The convergence. Internal instability. External pressure. Leadership fracture. All of it aligning, not perfectly, but inevitably. The system was no longer whole. It was waiting. And for the first time, it was not waiting on itself. It was waiting on her. Her phone buzzed. Ava looked down. The unknown number. She opened it. This is your last chance to step back. The message was short, direct, but it carried something different now. Not authority, not control. A request disguised as a warning. Ava read it once, her expression calm, her mind already beyond it. Because there was nothing left to step back to. No version of this where she returned to silence. No version where the system reset and she disappeared again. Ava typed slowly, her fingers steady, her voice quiet as she spoke the words under her breath. There is nothing to step back into. She sent it. The reply came almost instantly. You do not understand the scale of what this will trigger. Ava's lips pressed together slightly, her gaze steady, her breath even. I do, she said softly. And she did. Not every detail. Not every consequence. But enough. Enough to know that this was not about scale anymore. It was about inevitability. Ava looked back at the building one last time, her reflection faint now in the glass, but still present, still grounded. Inside, movement was accelerating. Decisions were being made faster, with less certainty. The system was no longer calculating outcomes. It was trying to contain them. Ava's phone buzzed again. A different number. External. She opened it. Independent review escalation confirmed. Immediate action pending. Ava felt it settle, not as a shock, not as relief, but as confirmation. The final layer had engaged. There was no pause left in the system now. No delay. No space to adjust. Ava exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly, not from release, but from alignment. Everything was in place. Every piece had moved exactly as it needed to, even the ones she had not controlled directly. Because this had never been about controlling everything. It had been about creating a moment where nothing else could be controlled. Ava stepped forward, away from the building, away from the place where everything had begun, her posture steady, her presence unshaken. The world around her felt different now, not because it had changed, but because she had. There was no fear left in her. No doubt. No hesitation. Only direction. Ava reached into her bag, pulling out her phone again, her thumb hovering over the final message she had prepared, the one she had not sent yet, the one that would not just expose the system, but force it into a position it could not recover from. She looked at the screen for a moment, her reflection faint in the glass, her eyes steady, her breath even. This was the point where everything became irreversible, not because of what had already happened, but because of what she was about to choose. Ava closed her eyes for just a second, not in doubt, not in fear, but in final acknowledgement of the path she had taken. Then she opened them again, sharper, clearer, absolute. Her thumb moved. And in that moment, there was no system left to control her. Only her decision left to define what came next. Her thumb did not hesitate when it moved. And that was the final difference between who she had been and who she had become. The message went out, not as an explosion, not as a reckless exposure, but as a precise release, directed to the exact points where the system could not absorb it without consequence. Ava lowered the phone slowly, her posture steady, her breathing even, as if she had simply completed a task rather than initiated something irreversible. Because in her mind, that was exactly what this was. Not revenge. Completion. Inside the system, the reaction did not come as noise. It came as structure breaking under pressure it could no longer redistribute. The first signal was not panic. It was interruption. Scheduled processes paused. Automatic approvals halted mid-cycle. Communication threads that had once flowed without friction now stalled, fragmented, redirected. Ava stood still for a moment, her gaze forward, but her awareness tracking the invisible shifts happening across layers she now understood completely. This was not chaos. This was exposure forcing alignment. Her phone buzzed, not once, but repeatedly now, different sources, different levels, all converging into the same moment. Ava did not rush to open them. She did not need to react. She had already chosen. When she finally looked, the messages were no longer controlled. We need to speak immediately. This requires clarification. This is not the full context. Ava read them without expression, her mind filtering not the words, but the intent behind them. Not correction. Containment. But containment was no longer possible. Because what she had released was not accusation. It was connection. Each piece aligned with another. Each inconsistency reinforcing the next, forming something that could not be dismissed without unraveling the entire structure. Ava walked slowly forward, away from the building, her steps measured, her presence grounded. She was not running from the outcome. She was allowing it to unfold exactly as it needed to. Her phone buzzed again. The unknown number. She opened it. You crossed a line that cannot be reversed. Ava read it once, her expression calm, her voice quiet as she spoke the response before typing it. There was always a line. You just never expected me to see it. She sent it. The reply did not come immediately, and that was enough, because silence now meant something different. It meant they were no longer ahead of her. Ava slipped her phone back into her bag, her hand resting briefly against her stomach, grounding herself not in fear, but in purpose. This had never been about destruction. It had been about correction. The system had made a decision based on removing a variable it could not control. Ava had responded by making the system visible in ways it could not manage. Not to collapse it entirely, but to force it to account for what it had done. Across the internal channels, the effects were no longer subtle. Leadership alignment fractured into conflicting directives. Compliance escalations multiplied, each one requiring acknowledgement, each one pulling attention away from controlled narratives. Individuals who had once operated within clear boundaries now found themselves answering questions they could not redirect. Ava reached the corner of the street, pausing for a moment as she looked back, not at the building, but at the reflection of it in the glass across from her. It no longer looked stable, not because it was falling, but because its certainty was gone. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. Ava hesitated for a fraction of a second, then opened it. This is affecting everything. Ava read the message carefully, her expression unchanged, but her mind noting the shift. Not accusation, not authority, impact. She typed slowly, deliberately. It was always affecting everything. You just chose not to see it. She sent it. No hesitation, no adjustment, because now, she was no longer explaining. She was stating. The reply came slower. There are consequences to this. Ava exhaled quietly, her gaze steady, her voice calm as she spoke the words before sending them. There always were. She placed the phone down again, her posture steady, her presence unshaken. Because this was the part most people misunderstood. Justice was not clean. It did not restore everything to how it was. It forced everything to confront what it had avoided. Ava looked forward again, her steps resuming, her movement calm, controlled, but final. Behind her, the system was still standing. But it was no longer the same system. And ahead of her, the path was no longer uncertain. But it was not without cost. Because now, every action she had taken, every truth she had forced into the open, was beginning to ripple outward in ways that would not stop with those who had made the original decision. The consequences were not contained. They were expanding. And everyone, including her, would have to face them. The noise did not disappear all at once. It faded, gradually, unevenly, like something that had been stretched too far finally settling back into itself. Ava could feel it even before she saw it, the shift from urgency to quiet, from reaction to reflection. The messages had slowed. The calls had become less immediate, less demanding. Not because the situation had resolved, but because it had reached a point where nothing more could be forced, only processed. She stood by the window of her apartment now, the city moving below her in its usual rhythm, unchanged on the surface, untouched by what had unfolded behind closed doors. And yet, everything had changed. Ava rested her hand lightly against her stomach, her breathing steady, her posture relaxed in a way it had not been for a long time. Not because the weight was gone, but because it was no longer pressing against her. It had been redistributed, absorbed, acknowledged. Her phone sat on the table behind her, silent for longer stretches now, the absence of constant vibration no longer unsettling. It was expected, because the system, once so immediate, so controlled, was now slower, more cautious, more aware of its own visibility. Ava turned slightly, her gaze drifting across the room, taking in the stillness, the quiet order she had rebuilt around herself. There was no urgency left in her movements. No need to anticipate the next reaction. The reactions had already happened. The consequences were already unfolding. And now, what remained was something else. Adjustment. Her phone buzzed once. Ava did not move immediately. She let it sit, letting the moment exist without interruption. Then she walked back to the table, her steps measured, her presence calm, and picked it up. Daniel. She opened the message slowly. They are restructuring everything. Ava read it, her expression unchanged, but her mind recognizing the weight behind the words. Not just change. Recalibration. A system correcting itself under pressure it could no longer ignore. She typed carefully, her tone even. They always were. She sent it. A pause followed. Longer than before. Then another message. It is different now. Ava's eyes softened, just slightly, not with emotion, but with understanding. Because it was. Not in structure, but in awareness. She placed the phone down gently, her fingers resting against the surface for a moment before pulling back. The relationship had changed. Not repaired, not restored, but redefined. There was no longer a gap of power that could not be crossed. Only a distance shaped by what had been revealed. Ava walked back to the window, her reflection steady, her posture grounded. She could still see the system in her mind. The layers, the connections, the pressure points that had once been hidden, now permanently exposed. It had not collapsed. It had adapted, but it would never be the same. And neither would she. Her phone buzzed again. The unknown number. Ava hesitated for a fraction of a second, then opened it. You forced a correction. The message was simple, direct. Ava read it once, her expression calm, her voice quiet as she spoke the words before typing. No, she paused, then continued. I forced visibility. She sent it. The reply did not come immediately. Ava did not wait for it. She did not need to. Because the exchange no longer defined her position. It only reflected it. Ava turned away from the window, her movements unhurried, her presence steady. The room felt different now. Not because anything had changed physically, but because there was nothing left unresolved within it. No lingering questions. No uncertainty. Only the quiet understanding of what had been done and what it meant. She moved through the space slowly, her hand brushing lightly against the back of a chair, then resting briefly against her stomach again, a quiet, grounding gesture that now carried something deeper. Not just protection, continuity. Ava stopped in the center of the room, her gaze softening, her breathing slow, even. The storm had not ended with destruction. It had ended with clarity. And clarity did not erase what had happened. It gave it meaning. Outside, the city continued as it always had, steady, indifferent, moving forward without pause. Ava watched it for a moment longer, then turned away, her posture relaxed, her presence calm. Because now, she was no longer reacting to anything behind her. And she was no longer chasing anything ahead. She was simply moving forward. And in that quiet, in that stillness that followed everything that had unfolded, there was something she had not felt before. Not relief. Not victory. Something deeper. Balance. The kind that does not come from control, but from understanding exactly where you stand after everything has shifted. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again, steady, grounded, complete. And the silence that followed was not empty. It was earned. The morning did not arrive with noise or urgency. It arrived quietly, like something that no longer needed to prove itself. Ava stood by the window again, but this time, she was not watching for change. She was recognizing it. The city moved as it always had, steady, indifferent, untouched by the details of what had unfolded, and yet, she knew something fundamental had shifted beneath it. Not visibly, not loudly, but permanently. Ava's reflection in the glass was clear, unbroken, and for the first time, she did not search it for answers. She understood it. The woman standing there was no longer defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by what she had chosen to do in response. Her hand rested lightly against her stomach, a gesture that had once carried uncertainty, fear, a fragile sense of protection. Now, it carried something else. Continuity, strength, a quiet, undeniable sense of direction that no longer depended on anything outside of her. Ava turned slowly, walking through the room with a calm that was not forced, not practiced, but earned. Every step she took now was deliberate, not because she was calculating outcomes, but because she no longer needed to. The system that had once operated beyond her reach had revealed itself. It had not been destroyed. It had not disappeared, but it had changed. It had been forced to acknowledge something it had been built to ignore. And that acknowledgement would remain. Her phone remained on the table, silent, and she left it there. There was nothing left she needed to respond to. No message that could redefine what had already been set into motion. The conversations that had once pulled at her, demanded her attention, questioned her position, had all settled into something quieter. Not resolved, but understood. Ava stepped toward the door, pausing for just a moment as her eyes moved across the room one last time. Not out of attachment, not out of hesitation, but out of recognition. This space, like the system she had confronted, no longer held the same meaning it once had. She opened the door and stepped outside, the air crisp, steady, grounding. There was no weight behind her now, no pull to return, only the quiet certainty of forward movement. As she walked, the world did not react to her. It did not need to, because the change she carried was not something that demanded recognition. It existed whether anyone saw it or not. Ava moved through the street with a calm that did not come from victory, but from clarity. She had not won in the way most people understood winning. She had not taken something from them. She had not replaced one form of control with another. She had done something far more difficult. She had made the truth visible in a system that depended on it remaining hidden. And in doing so, she had changed the rules without needing to dominate them. Her phone buzzed once, a final interruption, a single vibration that did not break her rhythm. Ava paused, just long enough to acknowledge it, then reached into her bag and turned the screen off without reading it. Not because she was avoiding it, because she no longer needed it. The system would continue. The people within it would adapt. Decisions would still be made, structures would still exist, power would still shift. But there would always be a fracture now, a line that could not be unseen, a moment that had proven something different was possible. Ava continued walking, her steps steady, her presence grounded, her gaze forward. She did not need to look back, because nothing behind her could redefine what she had become. The woman who once stood in that office, asking a question no one would answer, no longer existed. In her place was someone who had learned that silence was not the absence of truth, but the place where truth was hidden. And once seen, it could never be returned to where it came from. Ava slowed for just a moment, her hand resting again against her stomach, her breath steady, her eyes soft but certain. There was no anger left in her. No need to prove anything further. Only the quiet understanding of what it meant to stand in a world that had tried to remove her, and remain anyway. She moved forward again, blending into the rhythm of the city, not as someone who had been changed by it, but as someone who had changed within it. And as the distance grew, as the moment faded into something that would no longer be spoken about in the same way, one truth remained, clear and unshaken, echoing quietly beneath everything else. They did not lose control because she fought back. They lost it because she refused to stay invisible.